The first bill on the calendar for the day is Senate File 5335. The clerk will report the bill.
Senate File number 5335, number 1 on the calendar for the day, an act relating to human services, the unofficial engrossment.
To the author of the bill, the member from Hennepin, Representative Noor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. Before I begin, I would like to start by expressing my gratitude to the pages who worked with us, Rachel Onsario, Michael Thomas, who have been really helpful to us throughout this session. I also want to thank the nonpartisan staff who are doing an amazing job, Doug Bug, Danielle Pugnelli, for their unwavering dedication and service to our state. A big thank you to the DFL researcher, Joe Durheim, and GOP researcher, Jonathan Carter, for their outstanding contributions. I'm also grateful for the hard work of our committee legislative assistant, Dosa Ahmed, but also wanted to give a big shout out for our committee administrator for his exceptional work. Sean Herring has been amazing, the person who has helped us get to where we are. I'd also like to extend my appreciation to our Vice Chair, Representative Barner, GOP lead, New Brindley, and committee members who have contributed to this bill and also really open engagement in discussions. Thank you to Representative Baker, Clady, Fisher, Franson, Gilman, Hicks, Keeler, Kutizo Otun, Pryor, Kwam, Vanig, Zalesnikar for their hard work on this bill. Members, Senate File 5335 is the Human Services Budget Bill. This builds on what we did last year. The historic investment, the transformative investment that we made. Quite frankly, it's about saving lives. So the investment in this bill, when you look at the work that we provide for people with disability, that ensuring that they can get the care that they need in their homes and the services that they need based on some of our members, including our new member in the committee, Representative Vanig, who has carried a lot of bills to advocate for children with disability and to address the needs of the state. Members, this bill invests significantly also for aging services with the long-term care services, where we're expanding the loan program. And big other change that we made in this bill is to create the Office of Homelessness, which Representative Keeler was instrumental for her job in getting us there. She did an amazing job. I also wanted to let you know that in this bill, we made sure that the Carlton Care Program stays open. That's a significant achievement in this bill this year. We've had from the labor union, we've had from the workers, we've had from the department. We made sure that we care for those who need the most. Members, we also have the issues of the priority admission that came from the task force, and Representative Edelson for her work in ensuring that we're providing a little bit of a help for those who are now stuck in the hospitals due to civil commitment or who are in jail. We all agree that anyone who has got a mental health issue does not belong in jails. They belong in a different setting within the safety net of DCT, direct care and treatment. We also, in this bill, something that has been supported by all the counties and the sheriffs and the county attorneys, is to create the reentry program, whereby we're requesting the federal government to give us 1115 waiver so we can provide Medicaid services for those who are right now in jail because of the Medicaid exclusion. We can't provide that service. Individuals with mental health, substance use disorder, so they can get their medication at least 90 days before they're released. So this is going to be a huge game changer for those who are struggling within the system. The last but not the least, we are addressing the issues of substance use disorder by addressing the gaps that we have seen in the recovery community, but also looking for ways to really close those gaps as we will have more conversation. So in a nutshell, we're also trying to make sure that people who are stuck in hospital, whereby children who are there, we're providing incentive that they can come to their home. For those who are still stuck in the hospital, we want to be able to provide that transition through the acute care transition. That is the bill before you, members, and I ask for your support.
There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Baker moves to amend Senate File Number 5335, the unofficial engrossment. The amendment is coded A4.
To the author of the amendment, the member from Candy, Ojai, Representative Baker.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I want to talk about how important my A1 amendment is about allowing our continued promise to go along with a very important bill. I'm sorry, A4. One moment. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I was all revved up for A1. I thought we went in order. I wasn't sure. Members, thank you. The A4 amendment is an important discussion that we have had in our committee. I want to thank Chair Knorr for bringing a lot of good ideas through our committee. This is a good program, Hennepin County Youth Peer Recovery Program in Hennepin County. I'm very encouraged, excited about what this program can do. With the limitations that Chair Knorr had this year, because again, there wasn't any reasonable amount of money that could be used for some really good projects, we really don't have the funding for this project that I want to support. Chair Knorr's idea was to take it from a fund that is being set aside by license fees and settlement dollars, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later on. This request for $500,000 is being proposed to come out of the ORAC fund, which again is that fund of that set aside. That is not part of what this legislature has ever done before, is dipping into a special fund going for SUD work or education and prevention. I'm on that committee, been proud to be on part of ORAC for the last 4 years since it existed. We have a very robust granting process through and under DHS. What I have offered Chair Knorr is it doesn't belong coming out of the ORAC fund. Please allow it to come through the regular process through our funding opportunities. The RFP is going to be coming out actually in June, and I would hope that the members would support not allowing that to happen and to allow that to happen through that source. So, members, I appreciate a yes vote on the amendment.
To the member from Hennepin, Representative Knorr.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Beck, I think we've had lots of conversation about this. So changing the funding to the general fund at this point, I will say we should all vote green. Thank you.
There being no further discussion, all those in favor of the amendment say aye. Any opposed say no. The motion prevails and the amendment is adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Baker moves to amend Senate File Number 5335, the unofficial engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A9.
To the author of the amendment, the member from Candy, Ojai, Representative Baker.
Okay, this is here. Thank you, Madam Speaker. All right, so members, one thing that I have been working hard on the last couple of years is trying to get our SUD providers. SUD means substance use disorder. I'll use that word a lot, that acronym a lot today. The SUD providers are folks out in the field helping people in recovery, helping people their first moments when they are trying to get into treatment and get help, live their life in a way that they can be proud of. And there are millions of people in Minnesota that are living a great life in recovery. The SUD community has been shortchanged for a long time. We have fought for rate increases for them a number of times, and even last year when we had such a large increase in our state budgets, a 40% increase over the prior year, by using the surplus fund, $17 billion, and we raised taxes and fees by another $10 billion. We still didn't get it right last year when it came to our friends who are keeping your family members who are asking for help to help keep me in recovery. And I'm looking for some dollars, members, to help support the SUD community by some rate increases, some adjustments to the rates so we can get those to the providers so they can pay their employees a small 3% increase. That is my goal. I want to say again, thanks to Chair Knorr, he has always supported my desire and my dream to get that. A lot of members that I've worked with have wanted to find monies to do this. They had a very small target this year, and I'm hoping that members will support some dollars going towards this. We're using the fund that was sort of set aside. You'll hear a lot of it being referred to today as kind of a commissioner slush fund, which I've never heard of before, but it was set up for some incidentals and things that come up, the what ifs and if we have an urgency. I get it. This is my urgency today, folks. This has to be our #1 priority. In the last 2 years, the net gain loss of substance use disorder programs that have opened and closed, so the net, we have lost 46 providers around the state of Minnesota. And most of them have been lost in greater Minnesota because they can't afford to keep their doors open. So members, I urge a green vote. Madam Speaker, I'm going to ask for a roll call, if I could.
A roll call has been requested. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call.
And I just want to make sure that we put a priority, we show the state and we show the mission about this community is important to us. And I know that this fund that wants to be set aside is not as urgent as what I'm asking for today. So members, I appreciate a green vote on this. Thank you.
I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Knorr.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I think the A9 is attempting to do something that we've been planning to do for a long time. Our target was so small, and I think this funding is going after the so-called slush fund, which is a contingency account for the department. As you do the accounting, you can see that we already took 500. We're taking another 700 out of 1.6. So that account is almost done by now. So there'll be other amendments that are coming, but I just wanted to speak to this. We've got a lot of work to do. The budget mud that we have here does not work for 3% for across the board. But we'll do our best to make sure that we can find the resources necessary for the substance use disorder rate increases. But I wanted to be careful, because if we're going after a so-called slush fund, then that means we've already spent the entire amount. There's nothing left in any subsequent targeting that small fund that exists for the department. So I'll ask you to vote green, but we need to be careful going forward in how we address this issue. Thank you so much, Madam Speaker.
Further discussion on the amendment. Representative Baker.
And thank you, Chair Knorr, for accepting this. This is an important moment for those providers, and I understand this isn't the perfect 3% we were looking for, and I understand we're taking this to conference and trying to make it right, try to figure out a better way. So this is a great first step. So thank you, members, and I appreciate to light up the board green. Thank you.
There being no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll. The chief clerk will call the names of the members voting remotely.
Carroll. Cagle.
Cagle, aye.
Cagle, aye. Carroll.
Carroll, aye.
Carroll, aye.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 125 yeas and 0 nay, the motion prevails and the amendment is adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Baker moves to amend Senate File Number 5335, the unofficial engrossment, as amended. The amendment is coded A1.
I recognize the author of the amendment, the member from Candy, Ojai, Representative Baker.
Thanks again, members, for allowing me to speak to this amendment. The A1 amendment is something that is super important to me. May 20th, 2019 was a good day here. May 20, 2019 was the day that House File 400 passed, and it was the first of its kind in the country. It was a moment that really meant what bipartisanship looks like. And the A1 included very important components of that bill that showed clear compromise. As one of the authors, I knew that when I was trying to gain support from my side of the aisle, I was very adamant about what was called the Sunset Clause. The Sunset Clause, and if new members aren't kind of sure, what does that kind of mean? I mean, you got to get what a sunset is. But when you're writing bills and laws and you really don't know what the future looks like, you put in some wording and some clauses that say a sunset means we're going to take a look at this and see where it's going. Do we continue a fee? Do we discontinue a fee? Do we continue a policy? That's what a sunset is intended to do, because in the case of our House File 400 then, we didn't know how the opioid crisis was going to look exactly in 2018 and 2019 when the bill finally passed. What we did not know back then was, what did the federal support look like from the federal government? What did any lawsuits look like at that point? Because nothing had been decided on. There was no national settlement at that point. There was nothing. But we knew here in Minnesota, to get something done, we needed both sides of the aisle, because in 2019, members, the House was controlled by the DFL and the Senate was controlled by the Republicans. So that means we had to kind of find this compromise to get it working. And that year, it passed the Senate 60-7 in the final version. And on May 20th, 2019, in this body, the final bill that was agreed to in conference committee passed by 109-25. So there was broad support on both sides of the aisle. And I'm hoping that members today support my amendment to not allow the sunset provision to be repealed. Right now, it's supposed to end in 2031. That was the deal that was reached. Initially, it was $250 million. When the state reached $250 million of the license fees that we had increased at that time, again, before lawsuits, before settlements, we said that was our number. And when I looked at my colleagues on this side, I'm saying there's a sunset here. I know we're raising the cost to pharmaceuticals. I know this could get passed along the way with pharmaceutical companies. I get all that. But people were dropping dead like crazy and are still doing it today, though, for different reasons. But then pharmaceutical companies hadn't been hit alongside the head hard enough because they were over-prescribing, they were over-marketing, they were overselling it, and we all got together and said, this is what we can do in Minnesota. It was a great bill. It was a fabulous bill, but it wasn't a perfect bill. And Representative Olson and I have been actually tweaking it since then to try to get the little things right, because we were first in the country to do this. But members, what I appeal to you today is, this is about sticking with our word and our promise that in 2030, 2031, even around that time, we should take a look at this again. Because what's different today is we do know that the state has received now or signed into agreements with legal documents. The settlements are coming to Minnesota in upwards of $540 million over the next 15, 16 years to all our counties, larger cities, over 20,000, and 25% of that number comes to the state directly to the ORAC fund, which is, again, that Opioid Epidemic Response Advisory Council. We're the ones who get to decide which communities need it the most. Where should we focus it in on? We are laser focused on where this stuff should go. So if you don't support my amendment, members, you're breaking your word. You're breaking the promise of what we all had to do to get to a vote of 109 in this body. And the Republican-held Senate 60-7. We shouldn't be doing this, especially when we already now know we've got millions coming into the state from the same folks you're trying to continue to penalize that we promised was going to at least sunset or take a pause. And if it's really bad in 2030, 2031, you know what? I'll be standing here. If I'm still here, I'm going to fight to find another program. Or if they are at fault, or if they're doing something wrong, then let's do something that way. But don't just go after them because we call them a pharmaceutical company. That's wrong. At that time in our place in history, we did something that no other state did, but it took that major component in that bill to make it pass. And had that bill not passed, our counties would not have received millions of dollars in the last 4 years for child protection services. Our Native American tribes would have not gotten millions of dollars for healing traditions and for their way of healing people in recovery. This was a complex bill, and I urge members. Madam Speaker, I need a roll call on this, please.
A roll call has been requested. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call.
I'm just going to ask members to think about your word, and even though you weren't on the House floor then, the word of the body should mean something to you. I'm asking that you stand up because no matter what you do now, even if you vote with me on this one with a green vote, nothing will change because right now, this will not stop until 2031. I'm asking you to live up to the promises that we made to get to 109 votes on this floor, to the promises that we made in the Senate, 60-7. This is important stuff that we do. If you go against our word, you wonder why people don't trust us. You wonder why our integrity is being eroded and we look divided when we passed a beautiful piece of legislation and now you want to take pieces of it out because you can. That is not how we should do this. Members, please vote green.
I recognize the member from St. Louis, Representative Olson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Representative Baker, this is not the first time we've debated a sunset on the House floor. In 2019, the bill that passed the House floor did not have a sunset. And so we have a House position, and I have strongly fought to not have a sunset for exactly the reason that Representative Baker just said. We don't know what the future looks like. And sadly, I'm here to say that the future has not looked much brighter on the issue of opioids and overdoses in our state. There are a number of us in this very chamber that since the passage of the 2019 legislation have lost people we care about because of this issue. It continues to wreak havoc on our communities. We have so much important work that needs to be done, and I know, Representative Baker, you are deeply committed to that work, as are a number of people in this chamber, but that takes resources. And when we settled with the opioid manufacturers and distributors in the state, one of the things that I know I cared a lot about, as did other members in this chamber, was the disclosure of documents to understand what happened that started to create this crisis. And what I read by the opioid manufacturers and distributors was deeply disturbing. And to go back and say that we want to repeal the sunset is the wrong direction. I'm sorry, to repeal the repeal of the sunset is the wrong direction. The people that send us here know that the landscape changes, right? And that's what we're voted in to do our jobs as a legislative body. And we have the opportunity to revisit things, to see what the landscape looks like, to understand where we are. And the people sent us here, elected us to do our job. I'm not going back on my word. My word was never about a sunset or not a sunset. My word was about doing as much good for as many people as I can each and every day I am here. And knowing the landscape we are in and knowing many people who have been deeply touched since even 2019 here in this very chamber by opioid deaths, it's super important that we continue to keep these fees fueling the work we care about. And for that, members, I ask for a no vote on the A1 amendment.
Discussion on the amendment. I recognize the member from Traverse, Representative Baker.
Yeah, Madam Speaker, thank you. And Representative Baker, thank you for your work on this. One of the things that I see quite frequently, mostly on the weekends, is what happens to individuals who OD on several different drugs, but of course, what we're talking about today. And it takes time to help folks. When you have an addiction, it takes time to overcome that addiction. And repealing this doesn't put the resources that's needed to help the good folks of Minnesotans who are facing these types of challenges. This is something that we need to do as a body. We need to say, we need to look for the public good. We need to look for the public good. And this helps individuals. Is it a quick fix? Of course not. But when you put these resources in, because what we see in public safety, if it's EMS, if it's police, because in our neck of the woods, if you're having these type of challenges, we get called when something hits the fan. So we need to support this A1 amendment. It's an investment to the health of our Minnesotans here. Will it solve something overnight? No, but what Representative Baker has here is good. He worked hard on it. I know a number of members have worked hard, and we need to continue to support that. So I would request a green vote on this. Thank you, members.
I recognize the member from Anoka, Representative Scott.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm wondering if Representative Baker would yield to a couple of questions.
He will yield. Representative Scott.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Baker, I know you've worked long and hard on this issue since you have come to the legislature. And I'm wondering if you know any data, so to speak, of what has changed since 2019 and this bill was passed as far as where these drugs are coming from that are killing so many.
Representative Baker.
Representative Scott, thank you for the question. What's changed, and again, this is still a very, very fluid situation because we all know sitting here that we're losing this battle about overdose deaths, and we're losing our children, we're losing our loved ones because of what's now becoming really the rampant issue is counterfeit pills that are being delivered and manufactured starting in China. They're going to Mexico and they're coming across the southern border. That is the major issue, the major flow of how these deadly drugs are getting into our communities, in front of our children, in front of our college students. That's why we have such a high death rate with those young adults and children, because they think a pill colored to look like candy is affecting us today. This is what's different today than we had 5 years ago.
Representative Scott.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would Representative Baker yield to one more question?
He will yield. Representative Scott.
Representative Baker, are doctors overprescribing as they were back in the day?
Representative Baker.
Thank you for the question. I can't speak for every doctor. I can tell you, though, that a lot has changed in the medical facilities, the medical world, of how they have managed and are auditing and are looking at their own doctors and how they're prescribing, how much time they're spending with a new client, a new patient that might need an opioid for an injury. And folks, opioids are an important part of medicine. I've said that 100 times on the House floor. I don't want to see it go away. And the folks that provide that to us, they're an important part of why we can get through some of the worst injuries, burns and breaks and cuts, surgeries. We need this. And they also have admitted that they did not do a good job in questioning those high-priced sales folks and those folks from Purdue Pharmaceuticals and all that stuff that happened back in 2005 is when it all started, with the FDA saying, yep, this is good, it's not going to be addictive, this is okay, and they ran with it. Today, though, folks, the drug dealers hijacked this thing called a pill that we're all used to just take a pill every day for something. That's the difference today, Representative Scott. That's why today we should be careful about who are we trying to get the money from, and for the purpose of it, Legislators have to do the right thing and not just because you should or can. But I think that's what's different today, Representative Scott. Thank you.
Representative Scott.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, thank you, Representative Baker. And, you know, my husband has had a fair share of surgeries. He's got almost every level of his back fused except for one. And I can tell you the difference that I've seen from his first surgery to his last surgery, most recent surgery, in what they will allow to be prescribed. And it's very, very limited. You have a certain amount of days of an opioid that is prescribed, and if you want over and above that, you have to go back and get another prescription. Members, what this bill should be doing is repealing, or not repealing what was put in place back in 2019. There's a whole different set of circumstances and blame to be placed on why people are dying right now from overdoses, and we all know it's because the open southern border that this president and his administration have allowed to just let these drugs flow freely across our country, killing our young people. There's not a person in this body that can make an argument against what I just said. Let's place the blame where the blame is due. We should be doing something about that. Send a message to Washington, D.C., to the President of the United States to close the damn border.
I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Gomez.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And thank you to Representative Olson and Representative Baker for all your work on this issue that touches so many of us just literally right close to home in our homes, in our communities. So I have a dear friend of mine who today is out on the streets. She's doing fentanyl. She's my age. We're in our early 40s. And so that time period that you referenced, 2004, 2005, she's been using since then. And Representative Baker talked to us very clearly about the long road. If you're lucky, you're on a long road. In a way, she's lucky that she's still alive 20 years later. And I will tell you that she is a cost to our system. She's been through civil commitments. She recently spent 6 weeks at HCMC. And she's on MA, of course, because she's an adult and she does not have, opioids have ruined her life. And opioids have ruined so many people's lives across this state and across this country. And you can say, yes, the terrain has changed today. Today, most people who die, unlike in the early 2000s, back then, people were dying directly from the products that were often prescribed to them or to others. In 2004, 2005, people were dying from OxyContin, while Purdue Pharma and the Sacklers made billions and billions and billions of dollars off of the suffering that they wrought in our communities. And that part of it has somewhat been addressed, as Representative Scott talked about. When you read about those days in the early 2000s, especially in other parts of the country, where you had manufacturing moving overseas, and that was the only kind of economic activity happening in some of those countries or some of those counties, and some of those states, and you would read about the number of pills that doctors were prescribing, and sometimes there would be, they're prescribing 10 OxyContin pills or 10 for every man, woman, and child in a county in West Virginia. Predatory activities propagated by giant corporations who were literally making billions and billions and billions of dollars off of the suffering and death of our children. And the death today, even if it's not happening from OxyContin, even if it's happening from fentanyl, So many of the people who die from fentanyl today and died from heroin 7 to 10 years ago, they were originally hooked on legal medication prescribed to them by their doctors, pushed by big pharma, pushed by unfortunately, by medical providers in some of these communities that were more focused on their own bottom line and getting those sweet kickbacks from big pharma than serving their own patients, than serving the public good. And there is an unbroken chain, okay, between these big pharmaceutical companies and their activities with respect to their practices around prescribing opioids and today's fentanyl crisis. There is an unbroken chain. And the idea that we have people getting up and arguing on behalf of the talking points of big pharmaceutical companies who've socked away billions. No member of the Sackler family has ever been held responsible for any of these deaths criminally. They had to pay a big fine, but what did they do? Oh, they stuck billions of dollars into an irrevocable trust before the fine got levied. They're fine. The pharmaceutical companies are doing just fine. They can afford to continue to help us pay for the destruction that they have wrought. And the idea that we would let them off the hook when our kids are dying, have died, is just unconscionable. And I would urge a red vote on this amendment. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
I recognize the member from Chisago, Representative New Brindley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. And first of all, I want to be very clear about something and be very clear that my friend, Representative Dave Baker, is not here to defend a pharmaceutical manufacturer and is certainly not here to spew pharmaceutical manufacturer talking points. And anyone who would ever claim that has never spent a day talking to Dave Baker. That is absurd and patently false and frankly really offensive. So let's talk a little bit about how we got here. And thank you for the amendment, Representative Baker. We just heard a little bit about how the terrain has changed today, and yet there is a lot of holdover damage from the early days. Certainly from pharmaceutical manufacturers, also from providers. You know, there was a perverse incentive for a time for providers when it came to opioids. Providers would be sort of ranked based on patient satisfaction scores. Well, as you can imagine, patient satisfaction scores were much higher when patients were not in pain. And there was this sort of perverse incentive for providers to prescribe these opioids for a long time. As Representative Scott indicated, a lot has changed already. I will tell you, in 2016, as we all know, my late husband John had ALS and he was on a ventilator. And strangely, when you are on a ventilator, not strangely, there's a lot of anxiety that comes with that. And what providers have found is that the best option to help with anxiety, specifically related to a ventilator, is actually opioids. And in 2016, when John was on a ventilator, experiencing significant anxiety, it was actually very difficult for us then to get our hands on opioids. In fact, there was one situation where we were going into the weekend. Our provider was supposed to mail us a paper copy of the prescription because a prescription for opioids cannot be called in. You must bring a paper physical copy of a prescription to a pharmacy to have access to these opioids. So our provider was supposed to mail us that paper hard copy so that I could go and refill his prescription. It didn't come. It's Friday. I wasn't going to be able to get his prescription for the rest of the weekend. And in this situation, I was a little panicked, actually. I was a little panicked because for John, that was actually really critical for him to be able to get through the weekend. Fortunately, I was able to work with our pharmacist, and I won't disclose who that was, but fortunately I was able to work with our pharmacist and just purchase some opioids to get us through the weekend, thank heavens. I had another situation just recently. In the last couple of years, I actually had a dental procedure done, and dental procedures can be among the worst. And I had a very painful tooth pulled, and my dentist did not prescribe any opioids. He said, you know what? The reality is the data shows at this point that alternating between Tylenol and ibuprofen actually does just as good of a job, if not a better job, than opioids. My dentist doesn't prescribe them at all at this point. And that is what we're seeing. That's the trend we're seeing. So to Representative Scott's point, opioid manufacturers in the United States are not even the problem on this front right now. It's an open southern border. It is that we are allowed, and no one can dispute it, right? This is well documented. No one disputes this. We have illegal opioids and fentanyl pouring over our southern border. And it doesn't stop at the southern border. That comes right here to Minnesota and is killing Minnesotans right now, today. So there's just a little more history. But let's go back to this very simple point. I tell everyone, and in fact, I tell folks this when I'm defending my Democrat colleagues. I had a situation a few years ago where we had a dispute in my district. A Democrat colleague came to my district and made some promises to my constituents. And when my Democrat colleague left, my constituent said, okay, but can we trust that? And I said, yes. I said, yes, we can, because the one thing we have around here is our word. And when we break our word, all trust is lost. We can't get work done here when we break our word. I say that all the time. I might change my mind. We all might change our minds, but then we better be honest about that. But when we give our word, we give our word. And particularly on this repeal of this sunset, interestingly, what I have heard from Representative Baker a number of times is that it's premature. And in 2031, 7 years from now, like we're not even close, 7 years from now, we should have a conversation at that point. And we should have a conversation at that point to see, should this continue or should this not continue? But that's a conversation for 7 years from now. Pulling back this sunset right now is just a poke in the eye saying it's because we can. It's because we can, because Democrats have total control right now, and so they don't want to abide by bipartisan agreements that they made. They don't want to stick to their word right now because they have total control. They don't have to. They can just stick it in our eye. I hope you understand the level of trust that this kind of thing erodes. I hope you understand that when a bipartisan agreement is made and passed into law, that means something to us. And it certainly means something to our constituents. And when you choose to pull that back just because you can, that erodes trust. It erodes trust in this chamber, and it certainly erodes trust outside of this chamber. when it comes to trust within this chamber, I tell people all the time, you know, they see the fights we have on the House floor, right? They see these things that we are really that we really vehemently disagree about. And that's what the press feeds them. I get it. That's the interesting story. They don't see actually all of the things we do behind the scenes that we do agree on, which is a lot of what we do. Perhaps most of what we do is stuff that we agree on, or it's at least stuff that we can have an honest conversation about and come to an agreement. And it's so critical to maintain those relationships. It's so critical to maintain that trust. Because I tell you what, folks, you're not always going to have a trifecta. The Democrats are not always going to have total control of this body, of this state. You're not. And if you choose to erode that trust now, it goes both ways. It goes both ways. If you tell us today that we can't trust you, I assure you that we will believe you. We will believe you when you tell us that we can't trust you. Frankly, I think what we're seeing is the state of Minnesota already believes you that they can't trust you. But we can't afford it. This nonsense about being punitive for the sake of being punitive, rather than just getting the work done that needs to be done, and doing so in a way that breaks your word, is just wrong. It's just wrong. And people have long memories. So it's really unfortunate if that's the choice you make today, to tell us that we can't trust you, because we will believe you. We will believe you. This sunset does not affect anything for another 7 years. This just is not necessary. It is absolutely not necessary. It changed nothing about the landscape of how we are dealing with the opioid crisis, but it does break a lot of trust. Vote yes on the Baker Amendment.
I recognize the member from Isanti, Representative Johnson.
Madam Speaker, members, Representative Baker, thank you for this amendment. It's a good one. We had an agreement. We shook our hands. We actually put it down on paper. And the governor signed it. There's one thing that's very important to this body, and that's trust. Trust in our word. If we don't keep our word, they have no trust. Thank you, Representative Baker, for honoring our trust in the agreements that were made. But another topic was brought up that I want to talk about with this bill. A few decades ago, I was on a drug task force, dealing with these issues, dealing with the addiction, trying to get the drugs off the street. And we had done very good on stopping some of the heroin and all the other stuff. It was cutting back. But we had a bigger enemy coming. That was meth. We dealt with that by putting the precursors. We had labs all over the place. They're very toxic. From the large labs to the small Beavis and Butthead labs, which were 2 bottles that they used to make the meth. We got that ended because we put the precursors behind the counter. They weren't able to steal them as easy. Limited the number that they could buy at one time. That was a good thing, but it was a bad thing. Because what happened after that? the opioid crisis. We've had this agreement, and that really helped. I've actually had double fusion in my neck and was on oxycodone. I took it twice, got rid of the rest because of what it did and how it made me feel. I didn't want to take that chance. But now we have a bigger problem. The pharmaceuticals and the doctors are being very careful on how the prescriptions are done. They're doing their job. They're doing it very well. But we have an addiction problem. It's not just meth. It's not alcohol. It's not marijuana. Oh, that goes by the way with mentioning marijuana. I have yet to do a search warrant in my career in law enforcement looking for meth or opioids or any other kind of narcotics where you don't find marijuana. Don't tell me it's not the gateway drug. But now we have another problem, which is fentanyl, another opiate. It's not coming from the pharmaceuticals. The chemicals are only made in one place, that's China. The chemicals are being sent to Mexico to the cartels, who are making the fentanyl pills look like candy, or look like actual medications like Advil or other pills that college students want to take because they're not feeling good. They're buying them over the internet. In 2021, just as our borders were beginning to be an open border under the Biden administration, we had 5,859 fentanyl deaths in the United States. Last year, we had over 112,000. A 112,000 deaths because we have an open border where the fentanyl pills are being brought across this country by the cartels, and the money they're getting for it is going to China. We have an addiction problem that we need to deal with. And by sunsetting it, taking this program away, getting the money where it needs to go is how we help this addiction problem. It's important because it's not just opiates, it also helps with other addiction issues. Members, please support the Baker Amendment.
Further discussion. I recognize the author of the amendment, Representative Baker.
Thank you, member, for the very good discussion about this. I don't disagree with anything that's been said, especially, again, from Representative Gomez about how angry she is and how we did need to go after those pharmaceutical companies, and they should have done better. And I, like my friend Representative Gomez, I want to see the Sacklers go to jail. They were the instigator of it all. And that bankruptcy joke that they're pulling is in front of the Supreme Court right now, so that hasn't even been decided on yet. We expect a decision at the end of June this year about what will happen to that private company that had something to do with my son passing away. But I will tell you this, though, you know, that's an important issue. We can be mad as we want all day long. We can go after them, and I'll lead that vision. I'll lead that discussion. Let's do that someday. But to do it, though, folks, we wrote legislation that was first in the country. It was never done before. As Republicans here, we were bipartisanly supporting something that we could do because of this important clause in the agreement. The agreement was, let's look at it after we hit $250 million. At that point, we can decide to move it along. We can do a lot of good things. And we have done a lot of really good things with this money. But since this bill passed, the settlements have come into Minnesota and are coming into Minnesota. It's a 16-year window as of this point. Anoka County is going to be receiving $18 million over the next 16 years just from those settlement dollars. Not to mention the money going to their communities or their schools or to buy harm reduction services like fentanyl strips or naloxone. Those are things that ORAC is doing already for a lot of your communities. We're getting folks into schools, teaching kids about the dangers of pills, and we're moving towards that whole fentanyl conversation. Aiken County is getting about $2 million. I know it's important to Ron Crecia, Representative Crecia. He cares about stuff like that. And I have a list of every county and how the lawsuits are going. Hennepin County is going to be over $70 million in those last two awards. This is a formula that's based on prescribing overdose deaths, and this gets looked at every 3 years to see how that gets adjusted. But folks, it's a national settlement. Pharmaceutical companies have come to the table finally of the big arm of the law, and they're paying a dear price. Not a big enough price, but it's the price that was agreed on. But it just doesn't do us a whole lot of good to get our loved ones back. It's not going to help us get those folks back, because we're not going to buy ourselves out of this program and this problem. Representative Bierman and I have worked a lot on adjusting the pendulum properly with a product and a program called the OPIP program, which is the Opioid Prescribing Improvement Program, which was put forward very similar around the time when Representative Olson and I worked on House File 400. It was to make sure that the doctors that are really prescribing a lot of opioids were being closely monitored by the agency. And we wanted to make sure that if you were in your upper 20%, that you were getting a notice or a red letter or say, hey, by the way, Dr. So-and-so, do you realize? And then what was happening is doctors were pulling away from their patients because they don't want to get this letter. Representative Bierman and I were fighting constantly to try to sunset that program. That took us fights to the very end of last year's session. Now we're sunsetting that program because doctors have really done a much better job on getting it right. So when I was asked earlier, are doctors still overprescribing? I'm sure some are. And we've got to be sensitive to our pain special doctors that are dealing with the most complex pain on all those areas, and we just can't make it harder for them to do that because they'll just leave that business, that specialty, and go to something else. And yet our patients that are dealing with cancer pain and other major stuff that can't just be fixed with surgery. And there's many that are working really well with the use of opioids at higher levels. Representative Bierman and I spent a lot of time on Zoom calls and listened to the specialty doctors, and we had to get this right. So we're trying to adjust this pendulum. But members, this is not the time to just end this important deal that we made, because I know at the end of this deal, Representative Olson voted to support the bill when it left the House floor on final passage. She supported it. I was uncomfortable with the higher version of the $250,000 for a license for a company that sells a lot of opioids, like generics or Johnson & Johnson and those big companies that were selling it. That was a very high number for me, but our goal was, in Minnesota, we wanted to hit $20 million of revenue to not have to come back here to the pot every 2 years and beg for money to help our communities. That's how we did it. We wanted to raise our own money through a special fund, keep our hands off of it. Don't legislators kind of go and start handing out that money. Please don't do that. And you gave us the authority not to do that. But what this is doing is it is jeopardizing our future deal-making process. I want to be able to look at somebody in the eye and say, is Is this going to go forever, or can we take a look at it in 10 years or 5 years or 2 years? I want to be able to look at somebody and say, yep, that's our deal. And I want us to be able to stick to our deal. The pastor today had some really good things to say. Pastor Dobbs said something about, don't let us get more divided. And also he did say, if you need to say you're sorry, then say you're sorry. What I don't want to do today, members, is look to the members that I looked in the eyes and said, trust me, this is a sunset that's going to stick. Because my colleagues on both sides of the aisle said, this is how we have to pass the bill. And I don't want to have to say, I'm sorry, but I let you down. I'm going to fight to do the right thing here because we made a promise. And we've done a lot of great work with this bill. And I was hoping that the pages would still be on the floor. I know that right now the high school pages are off and enjoying lunch, I hope. Because I'm one of the lucky members that gets to go there every week. 9 a.m. on Tuesday morning is my standing invitation to go see the pages. I'm so honored and I feel lucky to do that. Because they always ask me, what's some of the best things you've done here? And I always talk about our amazing work on House File 400 and how my dear friends that we worked together in a bipartisan fashion really came together. And no one else had ever done this kind of thing on a national level to get the pharmaceutical companies to do what they did for us here in Minnesota. It could not have happened. It could not have happened if it wasn't a bipartisan deal, because we were a mixed and a blended legislature. And to the residents in Minnesota that are watching us today, when you see one side in charge, you can see what you just saw the last 2 years, how it's out of control. Spending or cuts, whatever it is, if you think it's one side or the other, I think all bills are better when they're written in a bipartisan fashion. I love the color purple. I wish we had it, but we don't. And when you don't have it, that's when I think things go south. And I don't think this is a very good idea. I urge members, let me back up and finish my page story. When I visit with the pages, again, I'm super proud of this because it was a bipartisan thing, and I don't want to go to them in the morning and say, this was a major hit on our bill. This was a major problem, because it isn't quite like it used to be. So, you know, again, I guess I feel so almost betrayed that we are taking back some of the important components of this because you still just want to make sure you can stick it to them. You can stick it to them because they were wrong. And that there should never be a penalty phase. There should never be a right sizing of a sentencing guideline, if you will. We got them good, Minnesotans. We got them. We got them when we did. And we still have a lot more coming. Purdue's not settled yet. We got more coming. I don't care about the money. I care about our deals and our promises, and how we pass bills around here have to matter. So I really urge you to support my A1 amendment that leaves the sunset alone. Let's not change it 7 years before we need to. In 7 years, we might say, you know what our problem is now? It's something on the southern border, or it's something over here that's causing our problem, because doctors and the healthcare systems and pharmaceuticals have maybe done some pretty wild things between now and then. We're not even wanting to look at that in the future. So don't do this until we need to really look at what is the problem then. We'll fix it. We'll find a way. Minnesotans will find the way. So don't be deal breakers. Go back on your word. We've done such good things with this, and you want it to go on forever, but I just don't know that this is the right way to do it. And I'm going to hope when this goes to conference that it comes back without this provision in it, and I'm going to work very, very hardly with our senators and anybody that's on that committee to make sure they understand my point as well. So I hope I get enough green votes today, members, so that we don't have to deal with this again. I don't want to deal with this every year. Keep our word. Let's show them what bipartisanship looks like and that we can stick to it. Please vote green.
There being no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll. The chief clerk will call the names of the members voting remotely.
Carol. Carol.
Carol, no.
Carol, no. Cagle.
Cagle, no.
Cagle, no.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 58 yeas and 70 nays, the motion does not prevail and the amendment is not adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Gilman moves to amend Senate File Number 5335, the unofficial engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A8.
I recognize the author of the amendment, the member from Meeker, Representative Gilman.
Thank you so much, Madam Speaker. Members, this is a very simple amendment to identify how many unfilled full-time employees there are at the Department of Human Services. So each year, we're finding the Democrats are willing to fund all these new programs and services at DHS. And DHS is very happy and willing to continue to ask for more full-time employees to do the work. We often know that these positions go unfilled and the appropriations don't cancel until the end of the second year of the biennium. This amendment would also require that all appropriations attached to the unfilled FTEs would cancel at the end of the fiscal year back to the fund from where they were appropriated. This would speed up the cancellation and result in more savings canceling back to the general fund rather than remain in limbo with the department's bloated budget and bureaucracy. So members, this is a very common sense way to increase the transparency on how many FTEs that we fund, but we never hire to DHS. I'd request a roll call.
A roll call has been requested. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call.
And a green vote.
I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Noor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I think the challenge with this amendment is we set the budget's biennium. It's never done in a specific 1 year. And sometimes when you have your budget set up, whereby you're planning to hire individuals, it takes time. There's a reason why the cancellation happens after the 2-year biennium program, because that's how our budget is designed. We don't pass budget based on a single year. So that cancellation based on this amendment is not going to work, specifically when we're trying to target the Department of Human Services. This is a state budget. We passed the budget last year. By the end of biennium, anything that is not spent will be returned back to the general fund. So I ask you to vote no on this amendment.
There's an amendment to the amendment. The clerk will report the amendment to the amendment.
Gilman is moving to amend the Gilman Amendment to Senate File Number 5335, the unofficial engrossment as amended. The amendment to the amendment is coded A17.
The author of the amendment to the amendment, Representative Gilman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So members, in addition to the full-time employees being an area of grave concern, there's also funding going to waste, as we know, with the unused office space that is used by all departments. The A17 would require reporting the total amount of unused office space and an inventory of owned and leased spaces of state agencies. I'd ask for your support on this and vote yes.
To the member from Hennepin, Representative Noor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I think this also follows the same issue, and I think we need to look into an issue that is going to be addressed by the admin, which goes to the state gov. It does not belong to the human services. I ask you to vote no.
Further discussion. The member from Chisago, Representative New Brindley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And thank you, Representative Gilman, for the amendment to the amendment and strengthening the underlying amendment. So, to her credit, Representative Gilman, in her short time here in the legislature, has asked these questions over and over and over again, trying to get answers from the departments. How much of your office space is being used, and how much is sitting empty? Because that office space that's sitting empty costs Minnesota taxpayers money for nothing. And here we try to scrimp and save and find pennies to support our senior citizens, to support our EMS services. But we are sitting on dollars. We are sitting on gold mines of money tied up in buildings that we're not even using. And if we're not using these buildings, we as legislators should care about that. We should care that there's money sitting out there being wasted. This is literally money down the drain. This is money paying for buildings, paying for office space that is not being used. And when we do hear about how many employees are working remotely, it is a high percentage of employees. The vast majority of employees are working remotely. They are not going to the office. They are not using these buildings. And yet we continue to pay for them. So of course this is appropriate. And these appropriations go to DHS. So of course this is the appropriate place to deal with them. But I am so sick and tired of sitting in this chamber, spending $17.5 billion last session. I should say spending the existing $17.5 billion surplus, plus an additional $10 billion in taxes that you raised to spend. Well, I guess when you've got $30 billion that you're throwing around, you don't really care about these pennies. Minnesotans care about these pennies. And by pennies, of course, I mean millions. I think we should care about millions. We talk in these chambers, we get real focused on very big numbers. And so when we see appropriations for, $1 million here, 500,000, it's really easy for us to become kind of cavalier and feel like, oh, well, that's not even a rounding error, right? That's like couch cushion money. That's the change you dig around and find in your couch cushions around here. Well, some of us actually think that those millions should matter. I suspect Representative Backer would be thrilled to have another couple million to put into EMS this year. It is so absurd that Democrats would block simply having the knowledge. Simply telling the departments, hey, you just got to let us know. Because that's actually all this amendment does. It tells the department that you have to let us know how much unused office space and inventory of owned and leased office space for state agencies. What do you have? Why in the world do you not want to know that information? You should want that. I don't know why in the world this would be partisan. I don't know why in the world Republicans would vote yes and Democrats would vote no. You should want this information just as much as we do. Why in the world do we want to cover for the departments? Why is that our job? Our job is to be stewards for the people of Minnesota and the resources that they provide us. That's our job. And to say that we don't even want to collect information that will help us do our job better, that is is so completely absurd. That is so completely absurd. In what world would we not just want to collect information, especially when, as Representative Gilman has asked over and over again, we start to sort of put together a picture that, oh yeah, most of this office space is empty. Well, let's get the facts. Let's get the data. Because if they are empty, there's clearly a different, maybe better way for us to do this. Whether that means that we should recall those employees and have them in the office working together and solving problems, or whether it means, okay, this is actually working well. So let's reduce some expenses. But certainly the right answer is not that everyone should be working remotely and we should be paying for office space. That certainly is not the right answer. That is asinine. Who in their right mind would think that that's a good idea? That's absurd. So let's just collect the information. Let's have the data. Let's know exactly how much office space is actually being used. Because if it's not being used, let's do something about that. Thank you, Representative Gilman. I will certainly be voting yes.
I recognize the member from Traverse, Representative Backer.
Yeah, Madam Speaker, yes, thank you, Representative Gilman. You know, there's a saying, to know is to know that you know nothing. And that's the challenge we have right here. We don't know the resources that are being used. I could not, right now, talking to business owners, job creators in my district, they are literally looking under every single rock to save a penny because Biden economics have not worked. It hasn't. Just be a business owner, a job creator, not a community organizer, but actually create jobs that builds the economy. I would love to know in the businesses I run when we are wasting money. I know any business owner would be. This is just very common sense. Are we using the resources or are we not using the resources? And quite frankly, we need to know. We need to know. We can utilize this money to help nursing homes, to help EMS, to help other projects that are important to the state, instead of collecting dust and cobwebs on resources that we're not using. Thank you for this amendment. Good going, Representative Gilman.
I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Robbins.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Representative Gilman, for this amendment. I am rising in support of it. This has been an ongoing frustration of mine for many months. As you all know, I'm very opposed to the Palace for Politicians that's being built across the street. And early on in my effort to stop that, I reached out to the Department of Administration asking for an inventory of all the different state properties available and what their utilization was, how many square feet are not being used at all, where else we could possibly move. And I still have not heard back from them. And then I had a private meeting with the Department of Administration and a few others about a month ago, and again requested that information narrowed more, just for the buildings on the Capitol complex. Still haven't gotten that information. So members, I think I'm not a big fan of putting stuff like this in legislation, honestly, but the only way we are going to get the information to make good decisions is if we require them to provide it in statute, because clearly they do not want to provide it. And it's incredibly frustrating to know that a large majority of these state office buildings are empty many days of the week, if not all days of the week, and we are paying leases, we are paying taxes, we are spending the taxpayer money, and we don't even know how we should reconfigure it. It's incredibly frustrating. This is a very responsible amendment, and I urge everyone to support it. Thank you.
I recognize the member from Isanti, Representative Johnson.
Madam Speaker, Representative Gilman, thank you for a great amendment. What this does is requires them to have a look. What do we need? What space do they need? What space can we get rid of? We have a lot of good programs, even in Health and Human Services, that are underfunded. Who knows, might find $10 million easily to supplement those programs that actually work without raising any taxes and actually reducing our budget. Last year, we raised our budget between 35 and 40%, spending $17.8 billion plus raising taxes $10 billion. This is the way to, with this amendment and the amendment to the amendment, it gives us an opportunity to look at what we need, look at the space we need, and gives us an idea of whether distance working works. We have multiple buildings on this complex that are sitting empty because the employees are working from home. Do we need the space across this state where we have offices, large offices? Maybe we can get down to smaller ones at a lot less cost. Using those funds to help our EMS personnel, which is in crisis, to help our nursing homes, which is in crisis, to help our daycare providers, which are in crisis. This is an opportunity that we have, getting this information so we can make proper decisions. As the other side of the aisle always says, data is important. This has given us the data to make those decisions. Vote yes on the Gilman amendment.
I recognize the member from Stearns, Representative O'Driscoll.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. Representative Gilman, this is probably one of the best amendments I've seen that ties together a time bomb that is ticking like there's no tomorrow. I sit on the Property Tax Committee, and I also have a lot of experience in understanding real estate and valuation. Folks, let's take a trip down memory lane here. In the time of COVID, we had, prior to COVID, state of Minnesota had leased and occupied a lot of office space, as did government in the city of St. Paul. And the largest tenant in downtown St. Paul is government. And government tends to sign long-term leases on properties. And what we have going on right now, people working remotely and the administration still supporting that. So we're paying upkeep and maintenance and rent on properties that we are not using, and properties that, quite frankly, we can't put back on the market because of the leases that we have. We just continue to pay on those leases. And I've just found it kind of interesting. I pulled up an article that I saw last week, and I think it's worth talking about now as well. It says Minneapolis residents' property taxes could rise steeply in 2025. Again, Minneapolis property taxes could rise steeply in 2025. And the operative word in this statement is residential. And Mayor Fry and others are quoted in here about the fact that the property values of commercial property are tanking. And it's really easy to figure out what happens on that. When you don't have tenants, you don't have rent. When you don't have rent, you don't have value on properties because of the net operating income that's converted to a using the capitalization approach to determine the value of that real estate. So buildings that are not generating income are buildings that are not worth anything. However, to be able to meet the service level that is needed in the city of Minneapolis or the city of St. Paul, those communities with a dwindling value and a high vacancy rate, again, means low property values. They can't tax as much. So that's going to shift right over to the residential folks. And I also found it kind of interesting that Mayor Fry said, seeing it's all in the article, quoting Mayor Fry, this is not a direct quote of Mayor Fry, but it's an indirect reference to him saying that it's going to be nearly impossible to keep their tax levy at 6.1% or lower as they had originally hoped and anticipated and planned for 2025. 6.1%. That's what they're planning on raising the city tax on the city property taxes in Minneapolis because of vacancies. Again, remind you that vacancies in commercial property, vacancies in office buildings means lower value. Lower value means less tax revenues coming into those entities. And then if we escalate that and scale it to the state of Minnesota has a lot of unused office space that it is also paying rent for. So to look at what we have as an inventory and then to try to make some decisions about how to divest that inventory of real estate or leases or land holdings or contracts that we have only makes sense for the taxpayers in the state of Minnesota, that we would endeavor to do something like this. Again, the Gilman Amendment is a no-brainer. It's like, I can't believe we are actually offering an amendment. I can't believe that we wouldn't have heard from MMB or some other agency who said, you know, the last 4 years, a lot of folks have been staying home and working from home, and we have this vacant office space. And if we don't have to maintain this office space, that saves money, and we can right-size our workforce around those facilities and the need for those facilities, and actually save the taxpayers in the state of Minnesota some money by perhaps providing some tax cuts for people, which we forgot to do last year for a lot of Minnesotans who paid and paid and paid to create a surplus in the state of Minnesota. Again, it's just a no-brainer. And if that board isn't like 100% green on there, if I was a taxpayer and I was a voter, I'd ask why. Why would you not want to save money? Why would you not want to dig in and find out what you're spending your money on? It makes sense to me. And I will be agreeing, Representative Gilman, on your amendment. Again, I find it just utterly unbelievable that we have to have an amendment on the Minnesota House floor asking for the common sense obvious. How are we using our space? How are we spending our money? Property values are going down. If you take away one thing from my speech today, when property values go down, rents go down because of the shortage of tenants. It means property taxes are going up on someone else. Or, heaven forbid, government would have to step back and say, well, how do we restructure our spending on this? So we talked about this in the tax committee last year, and boy, I tell you what, the folks from Ramsey County, the county commissioners, they're scrambling to get up to the testifying table to say, he's right. He's 100% right. We are experiencing that right now in St. Paul. And Minnesota, the state of Minnesota is going to be a contributor to that for those privately owned properties. Or if the state of Minnesota owns real estate and we're not paying property taxes on that, divesting ourselves of that and putting it back out of the marketplace, albeit probably one of the worst times to do it as far as trying to get a return on your investment. Because again, as rents go down, values go down. When values go down, taxes go down, or they have to be shifted. The city of Minneapolis has already disclosed to their taxpayers and to folks how they plan on doing it. I suspect that the city of St. Paul will have a similar story, and the state of Minnesota's story is really the same as well. It's just that we're a bigger government where we don't necessarily budget the same way as our local government does, and the process is different about how we move into budgeting here. So members, again, a green vote, again, I can't believe we have to have an amendment on this. This is just common sense. Business 101 that you would be looking at this and trying to figure out where your expenses are and how you can rein those in as times have changed. Thank you, Madam Speaker and members.
To the author of the amendment to the amendment, I recognize the member from Wright, Representative McDonald.
Madam Speaker, my apologies, Representative Gilman. I was out of the chambers when the amendment came up and just studying it. Surely someone didn't object on that side to the agency counting the number of space and inventory and letting us know what office space is used and unused. Surely they didn't deny this. Is this the discussion we're having? Could you yield for a question? Sure. Madam Speaker, would Representative Gilman yield for that question?
She will yield. Representative McDonald.
Representative Gilman, again, I was out of the chambers, and it just, I can't imagine that, what other author, I forget who's the author here, but would say no to such a very important study. Did they actually request a no on this vote? Is that correct?
Representative Gilman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And yes, indeed, that is what I'm gathering from the other side, is that they would not like to accept this amendment.
Representative McDonald.
Madam Speaker, and then just for the record, Representative Gilman, could you yield for another question?
She will yield. Representative McDonald.
Representative Gilman, right now, there are some people watching in Minnesota, and they can rewatch the clip. So I think it's very important that such a very important and simple amendment is clarified and reiterated for the TV cameras to hear, because I certainly will share this with my folks in my district. So could you state what your amendment does?
Representative Gilman.
All right, what the A17 does is require the departments, the state agencies, to let us know what office space is not being used. It's very simple. Again, back in committee, this was something I talked about often, and thanks to Sean back there, he was very, very kind to let me know, again, how many full-time employees were not being used and how many people were not back in the office as well. And it was a staggering amount. You know, over 5,000 or more people were still at home. And this is back in 2023. Now we're in 2024, and we know that the office space in these departments are still empty buildings. We talk about homelessness and where can people go. Well, if 3/4 of our buildings are empty and people are finding ways to do their work efficiently, still at home, to be safe, why would we be building an office over here if we've got all these beautiful spaces available that are empty? So it's on the backs of taxpayers, and that's the biggest thing that was concerning to me. We run a family business at home, and we're always looking ways to innovate, to take care of our team, to see what's working, the influxes with our, our ever-changing scope of business. And this was mind-blowing to me, that there's constantly people handing out just wanting the money, but they were not showing or having accountability for what was happening with the money and then also with the space.
Representative McDonald.
Madam Speaker, thank you, Representative Gilman. Well, Minnesotans, you're listening. Our Democrat friends on the other aisle aren't listening. Some are. Representative Newton always listens. I really respect that, Representative Newton.
Representative McDonald, I would ask for you to not make judgment on who is listening and who is not listening. Please proceed with your remarks without doing so.
Madam Speaker, clearly you're listening, so thank you. Yes. Well, Minnesotans in the private sector in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and all over our state, particularly the suburbs, the private sector is taking inventory of the buildings and the use to save their companies money, because Minnesota now is the highest taxed state corporate tax rate in the nation. So every company, every mom and pop business are reevaluating how much space they need and how much money it costs them. And if they don't need it, they'll get rid of it. And that's what's happening in our retail space and all over the state, and particularly the cities. In the next 5 years, some of these 10-year contracts are going to expire since COVID. And there's, as Representative New Brindley heard of, there's many, many folks living and working at home, rather. So those contracts will expire, and we're going to see a vacancy of many buildings downtown, and they'll have to do their best to try to fill those. But just for the record, Minnesotans, if you're watching, and I'm going to share this, your Democrat friends do not want to have any kind of audit to find out if these buildings are being used, and if so, at what cost, the savings. It's really not mind-boggling, it's not bonkers, it's maddening, sickening, and irresponsible. But maybe you already have a plan. Maybe we already know.
Madam Speaker.
For what purpose do you rise?
Point of order, Madam Speaker, under Mason's 124, arraigning the motives of a member. For the member to stand there and to say why we may or may not be supporting an amendment is out of order.
Representative McDonald, proceed with your remarks without assuming motives of the individuals across the aisle.
Madam Speaker, yes, Representative Liebman, you're right, because maybe this is already being done. Maybe that's why you won't take the amendment, because it's such a common sense thing to do. It's good business practice. So you're right. I was wrong. I shouldn't question your motives or the fact that you wouldn't take this amendment, because perhaps it's being done already, because it's such a common sense thing. So I hope that if this is Representative Gilman, would you yield for another question?
She will yield. Representative McDonald.
And I'll be quick. I'll be done here quite quickly. But Representative Gilman, perhaps since this is your amendment, I probably shouldn't have spoke on it anyway, but it's such a common sense thing. And if I say one thing on the House floor today, it's going to be about this amendment, because I can't believe it's not being done or they wouldn't take it. Perhaps in the infinite wisdom of the great people here in St. Paul, they're already doing this inventory of office space. Maybe that's why they won't take this. Do you think that could be the case, Madam Speaker?
Representative Gilman.
Again, I believe that the data is there, and no, we have not gotten the information back to us, so that's why I brought this amendment, just so we could look at ways that we can save money and be responsible with the taxpayer dollars.
Representative McDonald.
Madam Speaker, thank you, Representative Gilman. Well, I hope that we've rattled some cages or at least woken up some folks to the importance of taking inventory of how much office spaces there are and taking inventory of what we spend on it so we can save the taxpayers money and save the state money and not go into a complete deficit as we will do next year and the following. Thank you, Representative Gilman, for this amendment. And Minnesotans, you're watching. Let's see how we vote on this, that we are smart enough to take inventory of what we have here in the state, just for one department, Department of Health and Human Services.
Madam Speaker, point of parliamentary inquiry, please.
State your point of parliamentary inquiry.
Has there been a roll call request on this amendment as of this time?
Representative Driscoll, there has not been a roll call requested on the amendment to the amendment.
Madam Speaker, I request a roll call on this amendment.
The roll call has been requested. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Cleavorn.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I wasn't going to speak to this amendment to the amendment, but I would like to let the members of this body know that there is a strategic facilities plan which lays out space utilization analysis, portfolio analysis, and that admin is currently in the process of looking into all of the vacated space as leases expire. And I would just encourage members, you can look at it. It's called the Strategic Facilities Plan. Thank you.
I recognize the member from Olmsted, Representative Quam.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm really happy that there's a strategic facilities plan, but I and many other people have asked this question over many, many terms, and there hasn't ever been a really good response, whether it was when I was on higher ed, utilization of the campuses, and possible sharing of those facilities with local government, or every other department and area that has huge office space expenses. Would Representative Cleavorn answer a question? Yield?
She will yield to a question. Representative Quam.
When was this started, and what is the date they'll actually finally let us know?
Representative Cleavorn.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and Representative. The latest facilities report that I have before me is dated November 22nd, or 2022, and it has in its plan, there's a very good executive summary that you can read. It talks about space utilization analysis, it talks about the portfolio analysis, and it talks about the goals of the plan. And I'm just going to sit down for a moment so I can read it better off my computer screen. And the goal of the plan is to support the delivery of programs and services expected by the people of Minnesota, and to make sure that spaces are used efficiently and that the use of taxpayers' funds are also used efficiently. It's a very good report, and I encourage you to read it.
Representative Quam.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm glad that the majority is receiving information, because obviously we've had multiple members on this side of the aisle who have year after year asked for that type of information. I'm still waiting for 47 and a half questions in the medical committees to get responses and actual data information on those questions. Maybe I should pretend to be from the majority and they will actually answer me. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
To the member from Hennepin, Representative Cleavorn.
Thank you. Any member on this floor can type in the Google bar and find the report. It's there. It's available to the public. Thank you.
I recognize the member from Stearns, Leader Damath.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Representative Gilman, for bringing this amendment forward. Thank you, Representative O'Driscoll, for requesting the roll call on this. As you have heard from members of this body, where we have asked repeatedly how much space is owned by the state, how much space is leased by the state, how much is currently empty, how much is currently utilized. That seems like a very difficult question to have answered. We've asked these questions in the Rules Committee as it relates to the state office building expansion, the Palace for Politicians, the building that is going on, and we have been stonewalled and cannot get the information that we need. Unfortunately, the only way that we have had is to bring this to the House floor as an amendment to an amendment. Unfortunately, in this body, the majority is going to vote this down. Now, I have to question the desire for transparency. I would think if an expansion of a state office building and the work that is being done, if that was truly needed, why wouldn't we have had that hearing in the Rules Committee? Yes, it happened in 23, but it has not happened in 2022 or in 2024. Why wouldn't we be transparent in order to define and explain to the public why this is so needed? Again, this is a way to hide what is out there, empty space across the state, downtown, on this Capitol complex. This is a desire to hide what is actually empty at this time, and all we are asking for in the Gilman amendment to the amendment is that we could be transparent with the taxpayers of Minnesotans so we would know what is being used and what is empty. Members, I would encourage a green vote on the roll call on the amendment for the amendment.
To the author of the amendment to the amendment, Representative Gilman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So again, voting for this amendment, the A17, we strive for better government, more efficient government, and fiscal responsibility. A red vote is against that. It's irresponsible and makes life unaffordable for Minnesotans. Please vote green.
There being no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll. The chief clerk will call the names of the members voting remotely.
Carroll.
Carroll, no.
Carroll, no. Cagle.
Cagle, no.
Cagle, no.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 59 yeas and 70 nays, the motion does not prevail and the amendment to the amendment is not adopted. To the underlying amendment. Discussion? Representative Gilman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Again, I'll just talk real quick about the underlying amendment. We would have available, this bill would cancel right now $2.4 million worth of unfilled DHS full-time employees. $2.4 million that we could be using right now, currently. And again, it just shows again that there's small ways and big ways that Minnesota taxpayers are just hemorrhaging money. This is one way that we could have accountability, and we could have more transparency around what's working, what's not working. So again, I would request a green vote on this.
I recognize the member from Chisago, Representative New Brindley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Representative Gilman. It's unfortunate that we didn't adopt the amendment to the amendment. I was trying furiously to look at this report to see if DHS buildings fall under the scope of that study, but frankly, the website kept crashing. So, with this, with the cancel back of these unfilled FTEs. This has been an issue that we, on the Republican side of the aisle, have been talking about for years. because this is a way that we create a little slush fund in our departments. We allocate funding for X number of full-time employees, or FTEs, full-time equivalents, and then those FTEs go unfilled. Now, we heard in committee that while lots of appropriations cancel back, there is no line item on FTEs. So we actually don't know what is happening with FTEs. What's a little unique this year, and I don't know, maybe it's because we talk about it so much, what's a little unique this year is at least some of our Democrat chairs said, oh, hey, here's a little pot of money we can grab. And so they actually captured the savings of these unfilled FTEs, and then they spent that money again. So interestingly, the Democrats have figured out that actually this is a good idea. This is money that's just sitting out there. We should capture this money because it is not the department's job to decide how they spend it. That is the job of the legislature. It is the job of the legislature to appropriate funds. That is our core function. So what this Gilman amendment would do is say automatically every year they're going to look at their unfilled FTEs, and that money for that year is going to cancel back automatically. Because right now, we don't know that that's happening. And in fact, I would suggest that it's likely not. Because if it was automatically happening, our Democrat chairs would have had a difficult time capturing that money as savings to use right now. But they knew they could get away with that. Well, that should be the case every time. If FTEs are going unfilled, that money should come back to the general fund, back to the legislature to decide how to spend those dollars. That's our most basic function here. It's our most basic function. This Gilman amendment simply guarantees that we are capturing those FTEs. And Chair Knorr mentioned earlier, when he first spoke on this amendment, that those FTEs need to stay there because we don't do the budget on a one-year cycle. However, Chair Knorr recaptured that FTE spending in this very budget. So of course we should do that. And that should happen each year, as the amendment on line 1.14 indicates. It should happen each year. We should recapture those funds, and it should go back into the general fund. It's the right thing to do. This is not complicated. This is really easy. Vote yes.
I recognize the member from Olmsted, Representative Liebling.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. Well, apparently it isn't that simple and easy, because I understood Representative Gilman's argument to be that we weren't able to respend the money because we didn't know what it was. And in fact, we do. But I just want to clarify that the agency indeed came forward and said, because last year was a pretty unusual year, there was a lot of money spent, there was a lot of one-time money, there were a lot of new things started, and we also have a workforce shortage. So clearly there were many things in this most unusual year that the agency, DHS, and other agencies, in fact, weren't really able to get off the ground. And so DHS did come forward and say there were monies that we weren't able to deploy the way it was intended, and here's how much it is. And could I ask Representative Knorr to yield, please?
He will yield. Representative Liebling.
Representative Knorr, if you would, could you just explain to the body how much money in your budget is from unfilled FTEs and how you came to know about that money?
Representative Knorr.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Chair Liebling, if you look at line 300 on the spreadsheet that we all received, the administrative FTE fund, that the information we got from the Department of Human Services, so we can reuse that fund, it was $2.4 million that we are respending for the purpose of making sure that we meet the needs of Minnesotans. So we got the information from the department, we're reusing it for this fiscal year, but if it cancels to the general fund, it's available to any other area. So this stays within DHS. We have recaptured that $2.4 million, and we're reusing for the purpose of making sure we have a balanced budget.
Representative Liebling.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Chair Noor, for that explanation. And, but this is an unusual situation that we're in. Normally, we really don't get an annual calculation like that. It just isn't really feasible to do. Programs take a longer time to get off the ground often. And also, when we think of FTEs, an FTE isn't, there's a reason we don't call it an employee. An FTE is, a little bit of a, it's not an actual person. It's a little bit of a fluid concept. You could have different numbers of hours split among different employees and so on. So this is not a simple issue. And I agree with Chair Noor that we should not be adopting the amendment. So I ask members to vote no.
I recognize the member from Isanti, Representative Johnson.
Madam Speaker, members, Representative Gilman, thank you again for a great amendment. We get fiscal notes every year when we do budget bills and finance bills, how many more employees they're going to need for their programs. And we fund them for the entire year. But what we're seeing more and more is that these positions are not being filled for one reason or another. But I'm going to tell you what one commissioner told me a few years ago. They intentionally do not fill the positions. They keep them open so that they can take that funds that were supposed to be for employees and new staff and use it for programs. That's not what the funds were for. The funds were for employees, for the staff, for the good employees that we do have. Members, I think it's time that when we do these finance bills and it's funds for employees, if it doesn't come back to the legislature, it should be earmarked that it should only be for employees and staff, not for other things. And at the end of each year, unused funds from that program should automatically go back to the general fund. Representative Gilman, thank you for this amendment. Madam Speaker, I'd like to request a roll call.
A roll call was already requested, Representative Johnson.
Thank you.
I recognize the author from Olmsted, Representative Quam.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And before most of the members seated now were elected, there was an issue where a constitutional office did not fill positions and utilized that the money from those unfilled positions to sue several counties. There was quite a bit of discussion and debate in a committee. Since then, there has maybe been a little bit more attention as to filled, unfilled. Just a few weeks ago, I specifically asked over several years what were the unfilled positions, and in the current budget bill, what were the new positions being funded, and were there any unfilled positions from the past that were being funded besides the new positions? I didn't receive the data. Maybe somebody in the chamber received the data. I didn't. And why some of us are asking those questions is to better understand what funds might be available. It's fine if the chair has a special quick route to information, which is odd. That's what should happen. Chairs should have, at the snap of their fingers, answers, because there's big decisions being made. I think our frustration, or I'm imagining a lot of our frustration, is when we ask those questions in committee or through correspondence, meetings, and phone calls, we're not getting that. If there's a switch in the majority next time, this amendment will assure, no matter who is in the minority, who is in the majority, that that information will be easily available to any member representing any district. And that's the principle that I think a lot of us are arguing for. Being more informed across the body is better for the body. So I ask for a green. Thank you.
I recognize the author of the amendment, Representative Gilman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And again, I think this has been a great debate today. Thank you so much for information about the unusual year that we've experienced, that we can get the information. I don't believe it's unusual. I believe the spending has been unusual and it's been extreme, and we are coming into a huge, scary time of a large deficit. So I think people are looking for ways that we can find money to take care of Minnesotans. And that's why I've been so passionate about understanding this process. I know that there's hardworking people at DHS, and they have the resources. They've got an endless bucket of money that's available to them. And I believe that what's happening here is that we have to start looking at where we can button up the hatchet, where we can button things up so we can be responsible with money. This amendment is very good. It is responsible. It provides transparency. The answers are there. Anybody that runs a business, owns a business, or works with people knows the bottom line. We all know what our margins are. We all know where things are going to be working for us and the common good of people in our team, or not working for us. We have to start looking at what is working and what is not working. And this is not a big request to understand how many people are we down? How many more people do we need to fulfill the obligation that was given to us? It's not a very difficult thing to ask for. I know that we've asked in committee again and again, and the fact that you're saying it's available to us, that would be really great to know during committee and during the process. So if people come to us with the information, then we could make good legislation based on what we're getting. So I would ask for a green vote, please.
There being no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll. The chief clerk will call the names of the members voting remotely.
Carroll. Cagle.
Cagle, no.
Cagle, no. Carroll.
There you go.
Carroll, no.
Carroll, no.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 59 yeas and 69 nays, the motion does not prevail and the amendment is not adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. Before I ask the chief clerk to report the amendment, I would like to just remind the body that Masons 114 states that a question should not be permitted that reflects upon the character of or conduct of a member or upon the executive or other official. A question as to what course a member proposes to follow is not in order. That throughout discussion this morning, there have been questions around why people are voting a certain way or assumptions as to who's going to be voting a certain way. There have been questions as to why certain people are not getting individual information and assuming the intentions of the individuals not getting the information. I would just remind us to confine our remarks to the issue before us and to not make those types of assumptions. I would also like to remind this body that our job is to be in this chamber. If you are not in the chamber and you come back in and you say you ask someone to yield because you didn't hear the answer, you didn't hear the discussion, Our public who is listening to the discussion has heard it. And so if you want to ask questions, you should be in the chamber to hear the responses and the answers so that we do not repeat again over and over regarding a situation that has already been responded to. So I would just like to make sure members are aware of that so that if I enforce that you are all not surprised by what you are being enforced upon. So with that, the clerk will report the amendment.
Quam moves to amend Senate File Number 5335, the unofficial engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A12.
I recognize the member from Olmsted, Representative Quam.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I will try and speak more slowly so I ensure that everybody understands what I'm communicating. When we look at the bills we're passing now and what things we add so that we can have information to work from, this amendment has two things to it. One, it's long past time for slush in Minnesota, so it would get rid of the slush fund. But it's also long past time that we implemented oversight in the departments that have had a long history of having fraud, waste, and abuse. And I'm not saying that lightly out of thin air. I have spent my entire time here on the Legislative Audit Commission. I have observed multiple audits over those times, and billions of dollars that could have actually gone to people that need it. Now, you might not want to just trust the independent legislative auditor, but if you look over the time, you'll see examples of where the federal government discovered we weren't doing the correct activity and clawed back tens of millions. We've got times of where, well, just recently, court cases where there's Medicare fraud in the millions this year already. We've had audits of about $30 million that was overgiven to local entities. We've got audits that over multiple years that have gone to homeless provisions that had lack of oversight, behavioral health division. Those are two areas that we are not short of people that need that help. And if we've got hundreds of millions of dollars that's not going to the people that need help, that's a travesty. It's a travesty because they probably thought they were going to get help, but they didn't. And by adding independent oversight, we can maybe actually take care of not complying with appropriate processes, not complying with federal processes, federally required processes. Just in the last couple of years, I have asked how many of these cases is there fraud or concern of fraud with entities that have done business before and were flagged for fraud, and many of them convicted. And I have yet to have a response, zero. There has been repetitive issues that if we actually did the work, they would catch it before the money was gone, before it left the nation. We have multiple cases of where if they actually shared across agencies and departments the information of the entities that are flagged, have been convicted, or are charged and are in court, we would save hundreds of millions of dollars. But they keep telling us we've taken care of that, we are sharing. And they were so proud on a small feeding seniors program. Oh, there were only 2 that were also in Feeding Our Future. Well, frankly, if you knew that, if you actually checked early in the process, there would be 0 that got any dollars. And we'd actually be able to help feed more seniors. We'd help with the people that are homeless, the burgeoning issues with behavioral health. We'd be helping them. We wouldn't be telling people, sorry, we don't have any more funds, maybe next year. If I wanted to, I could stand up now or in third reading and spend 3 or 4 hours quoting out of those audit reports. But I think you understand exactly why an independent oversight to finally try and have the processes fixed is the right thing to do. So please vote green. Oh, forgive me, I'm going to ask for everybody to raise their hands for
Are
a
you
roll
requesting
call.
a roll call? A roll call has been requested. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Noor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Just to put it in the right perspective, the contingency account funding that this amendment is going for has already been spent. We've already had 2 amendments that took the resources from that account. So this amendment may not be in order. But I just wanted to let you know, last year when we passed the additional process through the admin, Chapter 16B.198, which my colleague, Chair Pinto, sent you that information so you can see the changes that were implemented. And also, if you go to the grants management process, there are rules and regulations and practices and procedures that have been laid out to make sure that we really manage those grants appropriately. Within DHS, there's the new system that they've implemented to make sure that every issue that goes through the grant process, there are steps that they have to follow. And I think, quite frankly, that is something which is right now in place to make sure that we address this issue. So members, I think we have done a lot of work last year to address this same issue, and knowing that this amendment does not have any resources left in that account, I will ask you to vote no on this amendment.
I recognize the member from Chisago, Representative New Brindley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Representative Quam, for the amendment. It's interesting, and Representative Baker had, right before the vote, realized that he had not asked for a roll call on that first vote, which I think is really important, because the majority did an interesting thing. They took 2 of our amendments right out of the gate that spent that money. And I sure hope they were sincere about it. But I've been around this place long enough to know that there's a very good chance that these amendments they accepted here on the House floor will somehow disappear in conference committee. And I sure hope that that is not the case, because they were critical, important amendments. But let's talk about the substance of this amendment and why it is so important. Just last week, another $2.6 million in Medicaid fraud. Well, I should say this time in Medicaid fraud. Another bit of fraud dripping out out of DHS. I think Representative Quam mentioned the fraud that was problematic for our counties and tribes a few years ago. That one was particularly interesting because the OLA report on that showed that there were so many levels of middle management at DHS that everyone went like this. And no one could actually figure out who was responsible for the decisions that led to a tens of millions of dollar problem for our counties and tribes. Although ironically, a new department was created last year that literally would not allow efficiencies to be found. It was wild. It was wild. So we've got MA fraud. We had the SUD fraud. I suspect many of us will remember the CCAP fraud that took place a few years ago. And hundreds of millions of dollars literally leaving the state of Minnesota and leaving our country out of the CCAP fraud. Even the Feeding Our Future fraud, which was not technically under the purview of DHS, even that, the vast majority of the fraudsters had links to DHS, had links to the CCAP fraud and others. And you want to talk about these great things you did just last year. So much oversight. Well, you didn't solve the problem, that's for sure. Because with these wonderful new processes you put in place, we just had an OLA report come out stating that DHS has already failed. And do you know how they failed? They're not checking the financial solvency of the nonprofits they're giving all their money to. What could possibly go wrong? What could possibly go wrong? You also failed in that $2.6 million of additional fraud was just announced. Again, we're told all the time, we got this. DHS does all their own internal audits. They're very effective. We put additional parameters around all the departments to make sure that as they are giving out grant money to all these nonprofits, that it's on the up and up. Your processes have failed. DHS's internal audits have failed. In fact, the vast majority of the fraud has not been discovered by those audits. It has been discovered by whistleblowers and the press doing their job. That is how we have learned about the hundreds of millions of dollars that have been wasted and abused in the state of Minnesota. So Representative Quam, thank you. Thank you for acknowledging that the internal workings of government are not succeeding in this area. And it's time to bring in a third-party vendor to audit the department. It's time to bring in a third-party vendor to examine the financial oversight at DHS, because frankly, they have failed us. It's time to look at the grant policies, because even with the new state law, they have failed us. And let's have that third-party vendor look at this to identify any additional instances of fraud. A couple of us got tipped off just last week about something that we'll be looking into. It's absurd. It is absurd that Democrats continue to cover for these departments. I don't understand it. I really don't get it. if you don't want to look for the fraud, if you don't, when we know it's there, we have example after example after example. Why do you have such a problem with choosing to actually look for it and root it out? Why is that such a problem for you? Because all we see right now is a very small number of people profiting off of the state of Minnesota, profiting off of committing fraud, profiting off of defrauding programs that are designed to help our most vulnerable Minnesotans. Those are the people being defrauded by these programs. And I cannot understand for the life of me why Democrats would not want to find it, why they would not want to root it out, why they would not want to put an end to the fraud pipeline that we have in the state of Minnesota. What you are doing is not working. What the department is doing is not working. At some point, we have to choose something different. We have to make a different choice. Somebody already said it, right? The definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result? You are not getting different results. Just last week, we had more fraud. Last week. What you are doing the same thing over and over and over again, is not working. And you know who pays for it? Every Minnesotan, and perhaps most importantly, the most vulnerable Minnesotans who should actually be the beneficiaries of these programs. Not these fraudsters who are making millions of dollars off of lax oversight, because that's what this is about. Representative Quam requested a roll call. Excellent, because I sure hope that we all choose to be on the record. And I hope we choose to be on the record for doing the right thing, for protecting the taxpayers of Minnesota, and for protecting the most vulnerable Minnesotans who should be benefiting from these programs. Vote yes.
Further discussion. To the author of the amendment, Representative Quam.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And to the people watching, you know, you probably could understand it better. It's like having laws against crime that aren't being enforced and don't prevent crime. We have policies and procedures that have been around for a long time. We add some every now and then, but they are not being followed. They're not being performed. What gets me with over a decade on the Audit Commission is the repetitiveness of what's not being done, what's not being enforced. And with me, every time I see waste, fraud, abuse, a lack of taking those dollars and actually getting it to the people that need it, helping the people, the communities, the mothers, the children's, use whatever name you want. That's where the money should be going. Before coming to the legislature, I performed audits and I received audits. And I was used to, okay, we don't have a good process, we'll fix it, and we actually fixed it. We need to perform these things, and we actually did that. We learned and improved. It's been disappointing that so many times legislative auditor finds stuff. But if we had an independent entity, real time, involved, then maybe things could be caught and fixed before the money is spent and gone, so that when we have a chair that says we've got the extra money, we can use it, there'll be a lot more money. Or I'm okay with there not being extra money because we actually used it. We actually helped people, because that's why we're here. Please vote green. Thank you.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Noor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just wanted to make sure for the record, there's no money to be spent here. So if you're going to be voting green, you're voting for something that does not exist. So I wanted to make sure for the record people understand that we have spent from the previous amendment that were introduced by the Republicans so that we can have a budget that is more balanced and ready to go. For someone to say that we're going to be spending something that doesn't exist is wrong. So I'm asking all the members to vote no on this amendment.
I recognize the member from Chisago, Representative New Brindley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Let's be very clear. Democrats had $17.5 billion last year. They raised taxes by $10 billion. And they chose to spend it on a $750 million fix for a leaky roof. That's why we are having this conversation. Because of Democrats' misspent priorities. And part of that is not holding DHS accountable for the fraud that they oversee. Vote yes on the amendment.
Representative Kwan, would you like to be acknowledged again, or can we go to the vote? No further discussion. The clerk will take the roll. The chief clerk will call the names of the members voting remotely.
Carroll.
There you go.
Carroll, no.
Carroll, no. Cagle.
Cagle, no.
Cagle, no.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 59 yeas and 70 nays, the motion does not prevail and the amendment is not adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
New Brindley moves to amend Senate File Number 5335, the unofficial engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A11.
I recognize the author of the amendment, the member from Chisago, Representative New Brindley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. So you may remember at the end of last year, at the 11th hour, we pulled the Democrats over, kicking and screaming, to get a little bit of funding for our nursing homes. As part of that deal, Democrats would not allow any spending that would actually help solve the workforce issue, help make sure that our nursing homes were solvent. That $300 million could not be used for any of that. What we did instead is we created a loan program. A loan program which, frankly, I was very skeptical of. A loan program which, frankly, many of our nursing homes have still not been able to take advantage of because they are so leveraged that they can't take on additional debt. However, it's a loan program that has proven really important for many of our distressed nursing homes. In fact, in committee, we were given some misinformation. We were told that of the $100 million available in the loan program, that only $45 million had been accounted for in applications, and that's not true. So I want to make sure that we all understand that that number is wrong. And actually, almost all of the $100 million has been accounted for because distressed nursing homes need that funding. 90% of the existing funds have already been requested. And the distressed nursing facility loan program that was established last year is very, very specific. And its intent is to target those facilities that are in the most danger of closing. So, for example, first of all, it applies directly to financially distressed nursing facilities. The current language, that's who it applies to, those facilities that are already financially distressed. And let's talk a little bit more about that, what that means. It means that in order to be considered a financially distressed facility, the net income of the facility is not generating enough revenue to cover their operating expenses. I know Democrats like to call that a structural imbalance, but what that actually means is there is a deficit. That means the nursing home has more money going out the door than they have coming in the door. That's one requirement. In addition, and these are ands, these are not ors, these are ands. In addition, that nursing facility has to be at risk of closure right now. Critical situation, they are at risk of closure. And, not or, and additional operating revenue is necessary to either preserve access to the nursing facility services within the community or support people with complex, high acuity support needs. These are our most critical patients. These are the residents of these facilities who need the highest level of care. That's what that means. So that's what this loan program was designed for. It was designed for nursing home facilities in financial distress. They are in deficit currently. They are making less money than they are spending every month. They are at risk of closure right now. They are at risk of closure. In addition to the thousands of nursing home beds we have already lost, these facilities requesting these loans are at risk of closure. And this funding, this loan funding, is necessary to preserve access. Those are the requirements under the existing loan program. But let's look at what Democrats are trying to change this to. Under the Democrats' new plan, this can also go towards just other long-term services. They actually deleted the language about being financially distressed. So now anyone can have it. You do not have to be in financial distress. It now no longer just applies to nursing home facilities. Now it's long-term services and supports providers. Massive expansion of who is eligible for this loan program. And now it can be used for nursing facilities with a medical assistance provider, so they have to take MA, that are licensed as a nursing home or boarding care home. And for other long-term services and supports providers, enrolled in MA, provide home and community-based services, personal care assistance, community first, early intensive developmental and behavioral intervention, home care services, customized living services. We have just opened this up to almost anyone. And this is the part that I really think is interesting. Well, we have nursing homes at risk of closure. We are now opening it up to almost anyone. And this can now cover just additional operating revenue necessary to preserve access or expand services. Expand services within the community or expand services to new communities. The underlying language in this bill completely guts the intention of the financially distressed nursing facility loan program that we passed last year. It completely guts the program. Well, we have $90 million in requests already for these funds. We are completely gutting the program and opening it up to almost anyone, not financially distressed, not in trouble. They can be doing just fine, but if they want to expand, well, we're gonna help them expand instead of protecting our senior citizens in nursing home facilities. So what the A11 amendment does is it deletes these changes to the distressed nursing home facility loan program, and we make sure that it is being funded adequately. So in addition to the funds that the Democrats added, we're adding funds to ensure that our financially distressed nursing homes, our nursing homes in danger of closing, our nursing homes who are spending more money every month than they are bringing in, have some level of protection. That's what the A11 amendment does. Madam Speaker, I'd like to request a roll call on this amendment.
A roll call has been requested. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call.
Thank you, and I would request a yes vote.
I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Noor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. For the record, again, the A11 is also taking away from the same fund that we've already used. But for the sake of just conversation, because that's what we're doing here, rather than trying to legislate and do the right thing, last year alone, in 2023, we funded the nursing homes $86 million that went out in August 2024 to all nursing homes as a payment. Just in the next 2 months and a half, nursing homes will receive $87 million that will go directly to the nursing homes. Members, we also invested $75 million as a one-time payment for workforce incentive for the nursing home workers. We also increased a temporary rate for $12.35 of about $50 million. Members, we also invested $10 million for critical access nursing homes that serve the rural areas. Not only that, we're also talking about the financially distressed nursing home. We have $93 million that was allocated as a loan program. Do you know what we were told when we had a loan program? The loan program will not work for the nursing homes. And during the conversation in the hearing, by the time that the application was due, $45 million was out. And as of today, the applications that the department received is about $89 million. Let me explain about that funding. It's a zero-interest funding, no payment for almost 2 years for the nursing home facilities, but the program will sunset. It's going to end. There'll be no funding that will continue in that program. Members, if you look at this process, the estimated investment that we made additional to that was almost $1 billion in nursing homes. We had 7.3% increase in 2024. We've got a projected increase for nursing homes of 5% in 2025. Members, it's not that we haven't invested in nursing homes. We have done that. But what I'm looking through right now is to take from nowhere, where money spent in the previous funds, that we adopted the amendments which we are committed to. When we changed the ORAC money to general fund, we took it from the so-called slush fund. When we made sure that we are paying for the substance use disorder rate increase, we took from the same funds. But nothing is left there. Right now, we are trying to do the same. We need to be more clear. We need to be more serious, that we can see the changes that we have adopted, that the process that we're going through does not work. And quite frankly, we'll talk more about, because there are several amendments about the nursing home, and I can explain what we plan to do with the funds that are being spent for the distressed nursing homes as a loan program. Members, vote no.
I recognize the member from Meeker, Representative Erdahl.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I'd like to thank Representative New Brindley for bringing this amendment forward. I appreciated the comments that she's made about this, and appreciate Representative Knorr talking about the funding that they have been working on. But I want to say that whatever we're doing isn't enough. More needs to be done for our nursing homes, because they certainly are distressed in Minnesota. I have a couple of nursing homes in my district that have closed recently. The funding is critical. Nursing homes are so important to our small towns in Minnesota. They are the largest employer in many of them. They are vital to small town economies, to say nothing about the need for health care for our elderly that these homes provide. Please, don't gut the funding for these programs.
I recognize the member from Isanti, Representative Johnson.
Madam Speaker, Representative New, thank you for this amendment. I don't know if you, if any other members have had to deal with it, but I had to deal with getting both my parents and my mother-in-law into a nursing home. Fortunately for my dad, he was smart enough to look with his age and his health conditions. He decided to go into independent living in one of the nursing homes in my community. That only took 22 months to get us opening. But once they were in, and after my father passed away, about 14 months later, my mother had to go into assisted living. Because she was there, they were able to transition her very quickly into the assisted living. And it wasn't many months later she had to go into the memory care. Unfortunately, she was only there for about a month and a half before she passed away. But she was able to get the care she needed while she was there. Then we had to find assisted living for my mother-in-law. 19 months later, we finally got a room. 19 months. And she needed it when we started looking. While we were debating this issue last year, there was at least 2, if not 3 nursing homes in Representative Keel's district alone that had to close. Yes, the state does assist some funding, but it doesn't cover everything. It doesn't cover the costs. A lot of times, if they do have insurance, it covers most of it. But if it's the state is paying for it, it doesn't even come close to covering the actual costs. And once the person passes, if they have any property, the state takes it, leaving nothing for their family. We need to do more for our nursing homes. They're so important for our communities. but they're also very important for our senior citizens when they need to move into that situation. But they're also important for another reason. A lot of times people have to go there for rehab after a serious surgery. But there's no beds for them. So what happens? They spend the whole time in the hospital, racking up huge bills and possibly putting them into bankruptcy. Nursing homes have a very important role in our communities. Without them, I'm not sure what's going to happen. I know for a time that one of my facilities was actually overfull, and most of the people there were not from my community. They were from the metro because they had no beds down here. And a lot of times the people leaving the hospital to go to a nursing home are going 50, 60, 70, 80 miles or more from their home and their families just to find a bed. We need to do more for our nursing homes because they are very important, not only to our communities and our seniors, but our parents, our grandparents, and our friends in our communities. Please support the New Brindley Amendment.
Further discussion. To the author of the amendment, Representative New Brindley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I think it's important to clarify some things. Number one, good news, my amendment does not delete the ongoing nature of the loan program. That's a good change. That's a good change. But let's talk about some misspent priorities and misplaced priorities. We were told a minute ago that it's not like we haven't invested in nursing homes. We gave them a temporary rate increase. Let's focus on that word temporary. Guess what? A rate increase that goes away creates a cliff. Creates a big problem for these providers. Critical access facilities, they got a pittance. I was so embarrassed to see the amount of money that our critical access facilities got. And until we fought you, until we brought you kicking and screaming to come up with the $300 million, that was all the money there was for our nursing homes. It was a pittance. It was an embarrassment. And even with the money that we convinced you needed to be spent, Democrats still chose to spend hundreds of millions of dollars more to fix a leaky roof on the state office building than they would on our senior citizens in nursing homes. Hundreds of millions of dollars are going for a palace for politicians instead of nursing homes. And we were just told that the loan is maxed out. And yet, you don't want to put more money in and you want to open it up to everyone. How in the world does that make sense? It's nonsense. It's silliness. And all last week we heard about all the departments who can just absorb this money. The money that Democrats don't want to spend, the money they don't want to account for, well, then the departments can just absorb it. But for some reason, they are still hell-bent on not giving a dime to nursing homes. It's wild. It's wild. This amendment is about fixing some misplaced priorities. This amendment is about ensuring our distressed nursing home facilities, those at risk of closure, those who are taking in less money every month than they are spending. That's who we're talking about. That's what the A11 amendment does. Let's vote green.
There being no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll. The chief clerk will call the names of the members voting remotely.
Carroll.
Carroll, no.
Carroll, no. Cagle.
Cagle, no.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 60 yeas and 69 nays, the motion does not prevail and the amendment is not adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Zalesnikar moves to amend Senate File Number 5335, the unofficial engrossment as amended, and the amendment is coded A13.
I recognize the author of the amendment, the member from St. Louis, Representative Zalesnikar.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. This A13 amendment is addressing a grant to the nursing homes to comply with federal mandates. I'm not sure if you're aware, but on April 22nd, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services at our federal government just initiated new mandates for nursing homes. They will go into effect in May, and they are significant mandates that will affect the state of Minnesota, especially nurses. These mandates require 24-hour RNs 7 days a week. The nurses will tell you, and the state of Minnesota will tell you, we need about 535,000 RNs. We're graduating about 50+ thousand RNs. We got a huge problem, and we're heading down another mandate that we are not prepared for in the state of Minnesota. So what this does for Minnesota is it takes this DHS slush money, which is, I believe, $2 million, and allocates this to nursing homes to prepare them for these pending federal mandates for our nursing homes. And members, what I want to let you all know is that in 2019, we had 381 nursing homes in the state of Minnesota. In 2024, we've had more closures since we left session last year. We're at 358 for a nursing home count right now. These are for the frailest of the frail. These are for the people who need a 3-person lift, a 4-person lift. They cannot be home. If they could be home, I assure you they would be home. What my concern is that in the areas I look at, right now I serve St. Louis County, the largest county in Minnesota, who also happens to have the largest aging population. So that percentage of people that is going to need this nursing home group is pretty extensive. It's growing because we're dealing with this 2 words, baby boomers. And we've been saying for 30 years, we better get ready for them. And here we are, Chamber, we're not ready. And just in northern St. Louis County, we have 474 nursing home beds. Ely has 1 nursing home, a 42-bed facility. That's it, 42 beds. If they close, they're going to Virginia. And guess, Virginia has 2 remaining nursing homes, 123 beds. Aurora has 33, Buell has 44, Chisholm, Cook, Eveleth, and Hibbing. There is 1 nursing home in every one of these communities, very few beds. And that's northern St. Louis County. Southern St. Louis County, every one of the nursing homes is in Duluth, in the town of Duluth, in St. Louis County. And that is 695 beds. The facilities I ran 30 years ago when I started as a nursing home administrator, is half its occupancy. The only nursing home that remains in Two Harbors, they're down 20% in beds. So you can do the math and see that when we have the largest group of people aging that have the highest acuity, I'm not talking about the grandmas and grandpas that can stay home. I'm talking about the calls I would get from families who have done everything they can to care for people at home and are begging you to please take them. And there's simply no beds. And if there's beds, there's no staff. So either one of them are an equal problem. So members, what we have here is a situation where we're losing nursing homes at a moment when we have the highest acuity in the state of Minnesota. So as your parents are aging, which I'm sure you're in the same bucket as I am with aging parents, I'm not sure if you're building a granny pad on your house or your property, but when there are no nursing homes, who is going to take care of your parents? Because even if you have 12 weeks off for paid medical leave to take care of somebody after surgery or for an episode is not a lifetime of 24/7, 365 days a year. And the calendar in a year has more than 12 weeks. So when you need to go back to work and these facilities are all closed, are you ready to move in your mom and dad, your grandma and grandpa, and your aunt and uncle? Because I'm not sure they're going to a homeless camp, or that's going to be the backup plan for Minnesota. To put our seniors, we've added more vets beds, but there are many of our seniors in 5.6 million that have not been in the service and would not be eligible for our new veterans facilities. And so we are in a situation right now where clearly we've talked about the nursing home loan grant, and Chair Noor and I have had conversations about the importance of this. And I screamed on the House floor for a solid year last year, begging everybody, please, this is not just rhetoric, this is going to affect your communities. And I just looked at the roster of where our towns are, every one of your districts, every one of the ones I serve. If you go back home, you're gonna find there's one nursing home left. And if it does close, we're talking about 90-year-old spouses driving for 2 hours, 3 hours to see their husband or their wife, or for you to see your mom and dad. And that's the reality we're at, because the only option is, it cannot be the hospital. We cannot just have them all be boarded in the ER when the families are at the brink and they can't care for them. So members, I would urge a yes vote. Nursing homes have not stabilized. We have not stabilized our nursing home field, and it's a lot of reasons. And it started before the pandemic. We've known we were gonna have a baby boom spike for a long time. And there is a real problem with being able to care for our most vulnerable seniors in the state of Minnesota, and it doesn't look good. So members, vote yes.
I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Noor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Here we go again, going after the same fund over and over again that we've already spent. So members, we're talking about nursing homes. The standard that we just had from Representative Zelesnika says that they're required to provide 3.48 hours per resident per day of nursing service. That's it. Members, we're talking about nursing homes. That's where the nurses are, to provide the care for the residents who are being served in that facility. So we need to be clear. We're not talking about any other setting. We're not talking about anything else. We're talking about nursing homes. And the way that this bill is drafted is taking $2 million that we've already spent earlier on today. So please vote no.
Further discussion. The member from Chisago, Representative New Brindley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And we just heard that these federal standards that are coming into place, it will require 3.4 hours of nursing hours per day. But you know that has to be paid for, right? You know that those hours don't just magically appear, right? We are the ones responsible to pay for it. Those are not resources that just magically appear out of nowhere. I mean, I guess the one thing we can say is at least federal Democrats are consistent with Minnesota Democrats, and we sure love our mandates. We sure love our mandates. What we don't like is paying for them. I'm sorry that federal Democrats just put us on the hook for this spending, but we're on the hook. So you better figure out how to pay for it. You better figure out how to pay for it. And you're right, here we go again. That's exactly how we feel. Here we go again, and again, and again, and again, and again. We are trying desperately to keep our nursing homes solvent. You are trying desperately to kill them. That's what this comes down to. And Representative Zalesnikar gave you the numbers. We're down to 358 from 381 and countless additional beds. Representative Johnson just gave a perfect example regarding his own family. We are now increasing staffing requirements while people cannot get care now. Under the current system, people cannot get care. There are no beds available because there are no people available. The beds exist. They're sitting empty in those nursing homes because we don't have people to staff them. And federal Democrats have just amplified that problem. So thank you, Representative Zalesnikar, for trying to help our Democrat friends fix that problem. Because make no mistake, we are going to lose more nursing home beds. Which means that those people will not be getting the care that they need. It's that simple. It is that simple. If we are not going to pay for these additional staffing requirements, the staffing requirements won't go away. What will go away are beds for people who need them. That is what is going to go away. So we as a body can either choose to fund that, or we can choose to watch as more senior citizens lose the care that they need. Those are the only two options here. There literally is not a third option. It is a binary choice. We either pay to fund these positions or the care goes away. Nursing homes cannot take additional patients. Those are your choices. We pay for it or it goes away. That's it. So thank you, Representative Zalesnikar, for trying to do the right thing and pay for it so that our senior citizens can continue to get the care that they need.
I recognize the member from Douglas, Representative Franson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, thank you, Representative New, for your comments. It was reminding me of a visit that I had with a local nursing home back in January, just a week or so before session started, just to go over what was going on, how the funding that was provided last year was working out for the facility, and to get feedback from employees. And one of the issues they did talk about was the CMS wanting to implement the mandated staffing. And for this particular nursing home, Canute Nelson in Alexandria, would mean an unfunded mandate. Members, right now, as of January 31st, 2024, Canute Nelson is licensed for 83 beds. But due to the lack of staffing, the average is around 62 beds. So that's 19 beds that are not being used as of January 31st. I assume that it's probably about the same or fluctuating right around that. But members, we do have a crisis of staffing shortages in our long-term care facilities. Another thing that they talked about, Representative New hasn't brought up yet, is that nursing homes are using pools. So if they cannot find employees, they are hiring quote-unquote traveling nurses, okay? So these are individuals that don't live in the area, but they are called in and they do a contract of, you know, a month or two or a few months, filling in the needs there, and then they go on to another place, and that's their job. It creates some friction as well between the employees of the nursing home as well as the pool people, because the pool individuals are getting paid astronomically more than those actually working in the nursing homes. They also don't have the ties to the facilities and are not, you know, they don't know the community, they don't know the members of the community that are living at that long-term care facility and members, so it does create that friction, and that was one of the things that I did ask about while I was there. And then of course, we still have not addressed the 21-month delay for the true cost of care. That's still an issue. So nursing homes are reimbursed 21 months previous to, you know, they're going off of what, 21 months previous to today's. So we're not factoring in today's inflation, and their buying power with today's dollar is quite less, or quite less than what they are being reimbursed for currently. So they're really operating at a negative here, members. So I heard a comment saying we have worked and funded nursing homes, and we've done that. Members, nursing homes are truly never fully funded, okay? Inflation, as I mentioned, we've got those staffing issues to worry about, and this body just needs to put our elderly as a priority. So I would encourage members to support the A13 amendment, support Representative Celeste Vinar, and I can never pronounce your name correctly, so I apologize. But anyway, this is a lady that works in this field, and she has done it for years and years, and I would consider her an expert on these issues. Members, and I would also encourage you to touch base with your nursing homes and find out exactly what is going on in your community, because there's some real issues out there. Thank you.
Further discussion. The member from Traverse, Representative Backer.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. And this is a common sense amendment. One of the reasons is obviously nursing homes are not fully staffed. I see this in the evenings when we're called, or even during the day. It doesn't matter what time of the day, but when we show up at the nursing homes to transfer a patient to the hospital, we may just have one staff person helping us. When I got started well over 28 and 29 years ago, we didn't have to do anything. They took the patient, transferred it over to the bed, to our cot, and then we, of course, would transfer them in the ambulance. Today, it's me, myself, and I work a whole lot harder than me and myself. So the key thing is us EMTs and paramedics are doing the work of the staff of the nursing homes. It's happening, and it's been increasing because we have not put this as our priority. And these are individuals who have carved their path so we could serve here today. Vets, our parents, our grandparents, these are the people that did the heavy lifting. We need to do the heavy lifting. And now, when we transfer them to the stretcher, the EMS professionals are doing the heavy lifting because they don't have the staff to do it. So, good amendment. Thank you. Vote green.
To the author of the amendment, Representative Zalesnikar.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, members. The reality is we did some inflationary funding in education and other divisions, but that did not happen for the frail seniors that are living in Minnesota nursing homes. So I'd like to ask for a roll call.
Roll call being requested. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I just want to remind members that the issue in the nursing homes has always been this 21-month delay. So if you're operating under costs that are 2 years ago for your reimbursement, and then you have mandates that are coming from the state government and the federal government, that means if you don't have the staff, you have to hire pool agencies that are coming in from out of state, which is hurting our communities, hurting everything we're trying to accomplish. And it's all because we're governing from a point of view that is doing mandates without any money. And we're expecting to have no deficiencies. So it's not shocking to see that we're in this bind that we're in when nursing homes were fined. When I look at the data by the state surveyors, nursing homes received $1 million in fines during the COVID years. Assisted livings received $3 million in the COVID years for doing nothing wrong. It was nothing they did wrong. This body set the rules, as did the federal government, on the terms, all during COVID. Do you remember when we sent people home for 14 days, 10 days, 7 days, 5 days, 3 days, and they said, hey, by the way, if you're vertical, come to work with your COVID positive because we now need you. And we wonder why we have a morale issue in our healthcare settings. And we wonder why we don't have staff. There was no second, third line like hockey. This is real people's lives. And so when our staff are burnt out from 16-hour shifts day after day after day, it's no wonder they're not doing this. But we find the very settings that we license. Think about this, members. We find the facilities as if we were not in a pandemic. Who did we do that to? And then we wonder why they're still asking us for money when they have a 2-year delay in payment. They're not having any inflationary adjustment to their rates. We wouldn't pass to let outside audits do it faster so we can get them back their rates faster. We said, nope, state of Minnesota's got to do it, even if they're two years behind. And then we're wondering why we have to spend more money. Because, of course, they're going to have pool expenses that are up and off to the moon. And we're not having people that know the residents take care of them. But yet we continue to make insane decisions in this body. And we will have negative outcomes. We already are. And I'm not going to convince any of you today to vote yes. I'm sure of that. But I would love to be proven wrong. But I've been in this field for 40 years, and it's highly dependent on staff. And if you don't have a body, there's no robotics machine that's going to lift your mom out of her bed and put her on the toilet, or change her, or dress her, or feed her. It's not going to work that way. So if we're not going to invest in the people that's going to match the mandates of what we're expecting at a state level and a federal level, then we should expect to see a lot more immediate jeopardies and continual reports from the state agencies and the federal agencies say, you know what, everybody's out of compliance. We have horrible nursing homes, horrible assisted livings, horrible. There's abuse, there's neglect. The funny thing is, look in the mirror. You were the voting member that created the platform for this to be created. It is not our caregivers' fault. They are doing the best they can to be an aide, to be a nurse, to be the housekeeper, to be the dietary aide, to be the cook. They're the butcher, the baker, and the candlestick maker, and they are not being listened to. And unless we choose to listen, we're going to go around the tree the same way. And we'll see more closures till we're in an absolute crisis. And because the new crisis is going to be all the people that we report to and work for, the people that elected us are going to be calling us like crazy when they have to provide 24-hour care 365 days a year. Because if you've ever done it, you'll find out how hard the work is. Members, vote green.
There being no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll. The chief clerk will call the names of the members voting remotely.
Carroll.
Carroll, no.
Carroll, no. Cagle.
Cagle, no.
Cagle, no.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 60 yeas and 68 nays, the motion does not prevail and the amendment is not adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
New Brindley moves to amend Senate File number 5335, the unofficial engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A6.
I recognize the author of the amendment, the member from Chisago, Representative New Brindley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. You know, as we were going through this bill and looking at the damage being done to our seniors, I asked a question. What is the current state of our nursing home facilities? And right now, there are 2 facilities in this state right now today, currently in state receivership. That means that they are not solvent. That means they are not solvent. They cannot survive right now. On the flip side, there are 2 provisions in the underlying bill that do additional damage to our senior citizens. One, as we've been discussing, is the explosion of this loan program that is supposed to help financially distressed nursing home facilities and is now being bastardized to be able to use for whatever you want. So that's one of them. The other one we haven't talked about a lot yet is the elimination of the elderly waiver disproportionate share payment. And the reason this payment exists is because assisted living facilities that accept Medicaid patients, Medicaid payers, don't make enough money to cover their costs. What the state chooses to pay them is not enough to cover their costs. So for a number of years, we've had a disproportionate share payment to them, saying, hey, if you will take these Medicaid patients, we will offset your losses with a disproportionate share payment. That's what this is about. So those assisted living facilities right now on elderly waiver, the Democrats, oh, and I will add that when this program was created, it has a built-in sunset for when we bring those rates up to current market rate. And the Democrats have decided that they've gotten there. We are now up to 2017. That's the year we have pegged to. We're up to 2017, and somehow Democrats think, well, hey, our job is done. Our job is done. We're clearly funded. Can you imagine if any of us were still living under the 2017 economy? My goodness, hot dog, I would be thrilled if I was living under the 2017 economy with 2017 expenses, with the 2017 price of gas, with the 2017 cost of groceries. My goodness, I would be thrilled. I would be thrilled. But that's not what the Democrats are doing. They're saying, hey, we're going to pay you the 2017, what all of these expenses cost in 2017. That's how much we're going to pay you, even though you are paying 2024 rates. That's what that means. So while our assisted living facilities, those who are taking this elderly waiver disproportionate share, while they are paying 2024 prices, the Democrats have decided that 2017 reimbursement is enough. So what my amendment does is it says that as long as we have nursing home facilities that are in state receivership, we're not going to implement these 2 provisions, the expansion of the loan program and the disproportionate share changes. We're going to keep those 2 things in place as they exist now, as they exist for the purpose of saving care for our senior citizens. We're going to leave those in place until we don't have nursing homes in state receivership anymore, until we have made sure that our nursing homes are indeed solvent and can survive. It's a very simple vote. Madam Speaker, I'd request a roll call on this.
Seeing 15 hands, there will be roll call.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And members, I would respectfully request you support the amendment.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Knorr.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I think this amendment has got several components, but I'll address the first one. Let me be clear. I'll tell you the story of Mary, who is an elderly person, and she looked into the eye of every member who was sitting in the committee. She said, "Please do not forget about us." And we did not forget about Mary. Quite frankly, when our budget was introduced last year, we increased the elderly waiver by 45%. To the extent that the people who are advocating for an increased process, they were asking me, what were you thinking about? I was thinking about Mary, who came to us, as she spoke about Najib, who was getting paid small salary to make sure that he keeps on working in assisted living facility. Members, when we did that, the amount that we were paying through the disproportionate share, and I'll explain what it is. This is about facilities with customized living, with 83.5% of residents who are receiving customized living. It also requires that 70% of those residents are receiving elderly waiver. If we continue with this proportionate share, they'll be receiving $145 right now, rate reimbursement. But guess what? They're getting close to $200 as of today because of the work that we did. The requirement that when we reach that threshold, the disproportionate share will no longer exist. And quite frankly, if we're talking about the customized living, let's look at the CADI waiver. Let's look at the BI waiver. And let's not incentivize whereby you're creating a situation, if you're on CADI waiver, if you're on a BI waiver, we are not going to let you stay in that facility because we will not be within the threshold that is required. But because of that reason, we increased the share, the amount of elderly waiver for the first time in many years by 45%. You can look at the budget that we passed last year. Members, also the discussion about the loan program, the receivership. Madam Speaker, if I may ask a question, if Representative Schumacher will yield for a question.
Representative Schumacher, will you yield? He will yield. Representative Nort.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Schumacher, if you can explain to the body, you were instrumental in how we created the value-based reimbursement for nursing homes. If you can remind the body how that system really works, because I think we're missing the point right now when we know that the funds going to the nursing home, when you worked on that process, it was already baked in that it's included in the Focus Ed program. Can you remind us how that system really works?
Representative Schumacher.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and Representative Knorr. That is a discussion from a long time ago, and I try to put those thoughts out of my mind, but appreciate the opportunity to talk about it once again. The first thing to note is that the discussion here on this amendment is on the elderly waiver, but the question is about nursing home rates and what we did. Basically, at that time, back in 2015, 2016, when we were trying to find a fix for this, what we were experiencing is that the nursing home rates in the state were basically set up as a fee-for-service, and that there was patchwork processes that were put into place for more than a generation trying to keep up with rates, and some rates would get increased from year to year and other rates wouldn't, and that was, for a very complicated system, very hard to maintain and very hard to keep up with. And so there was a proposal that was brought forward, started with the industry and the department working together to try and find something more reasonable. I worked with Senator Laurie and Governor Dayton in his office to make sure that we could find some kind of solution that was going to be useful there, that worked into perpetuity there, and so we didn't have to come back and ask for a 5% increase for this set of services and a 3% increase for that. And the idea with the structure here is that it would be set up so that it was on a cost basis moving forward. Instead of being reimbursed on a fee-for-service basis, it was a cost basis that we utilized. And the idea was that there would be two sets, really three sets of fees that would come out. Those that were reimbursed directly and immediately, like health insurance and those types of costs. Other costs that would be part of a cost system that would take a little bit of time to review and audit before it moved forward, and then those costs that the state wasn't going to reimburse, but maybe costs to the nursing facility. I do remember at the time that the Department of Human Services, the director that we were working with on that proposal, didn't want that gap to be any shorter in the window there because he was retiring and he didn't want to leave that on to someone else to have to deal with. And so the reimbursement rates and the lag behind them largely comes from that and the technology that they were using a decade ago when we first started working on these pieces and moving forward with that. I'm not sure, Representative Knorr, if that answers your question, but would be happy to dive in deeper if you so choose. Thank you.
Representative Knorr.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you so much, Representative Schumacher. It's based on cost reporting that the nursing home have incurred. It's a cost basis. So when a nursing facility goes to receivership, it's basically because of maybe misappropriation. When the health and safety of the residents is of concern, of course, we want to make sure that we protect the health and safety of residents in a nursing home. And hence, they go under receivership. Members, the nursing board standards that were mentioned, I will discuss that later, but I just wanted to note that this amendment does not fix anything. This amendment is not the way that this proportional share was done, so I will ask you to vote no on this amendment.
Further discussion. The member from St. Louis, Representative Lesnigar.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And members, I just wanted to kind of reset the table on this amendment. This amendment on this disproportionate is regarding elderly waiver, which is medical assistance in assisted living. So I don't want us to be confused about the nursing homes and how the nursing homes are funded and how assisted livings are funded. The reality is that when I first started in the assisted living field in 2000, the model was built on a structural reimbursement where if I was taking care of one person and their needs were X in the nursing home and we got $4,000 a month for Millie, but now Millie's going to the assisted living and she's got the same care needs and the reimbursement was 75%. So instead of paying $4,000 in the nursing home, it was based on 75% would be the maximum reimbursement you could get in the assisted living for somebody on medical assistant. And why did the state do this in their wisdom? In the year 2000, when the first assisted livings were coming into Minnesota, it was because they knew there was going to be a lot of aging seniors. They wanted to be ready to have a more affordable place in a step down of the nursing home. And so as people are aging, what happens, you could be private pay for 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, 2 years, 3 years. It's different for everybody. But when they run out of money, in assisted livings, many of them only had so many beds for medical assistance because they had this rate structure that paid you 75% of your costs. What this disproportionate model did is for a select handful of providers, it said, look, If you're going to care for 70% of elderly waiver, people on medical assistance, in this model, we're going to give you a little add-on rate to get you closer to the costs. And in my opinion, that was brilliant, because if they're not in that model, they're going to go to a higher model, which is the hospital or the nursing home, which is going to be at least a 25% increase in cost for the same person. So members, I'm here to tell you that it's a good investment to continue this disproportionate share, because if it's eliminated, we're just going to have situations where, from straight math, providers are going to have to decrease the number of slots they can have to provide medical assistance, which is called elderly waiver, in the assisted living. And that's a completely different way we fund. With elderly waiver, the rates are different. It's not apples to apples. We have audits with the DHS that are 2 years behind on the nursing homes. That's one can of worms. But on the assisted living side, it's not the same. And so the model was made to give people choice, which has been a phenomenal model. But as we move forward, if we eliminate this elderly waiver share, and the fact is that they don't have a cost-based reimbursement. They're not in the same box as the nursing homes, where you get your rates, 2 years after for the expense. It's not that way in the assisted living. The state of Minnesota determines the rates for assisted living, and they were always set to be much lower than what a nursing home would be, deliberately. And if we don't honor this elderly waiver proportion, we're going to have a negative effect for the people that have low incomes, and that's who I fear are going to be hurt the most. It's going to be the people who don't have the private pay resources, they've burnt through their money, or they didn't have money, and the assisted living could adequately provide for their needs. But if we eliminate this, all we're doing is telling the providers, we're not going to give you the funding for the costs that you have to care for this group of people, even though it's going to cost the state of Minnesota less in an assisted living model than it will cost us in a nursing home model. So members, if you vote no, we're just moving these people to the highest cost center, which we already know is the nursing home. And we're trying to avoid that, is what I've been hearing for 30 years. We don't want people in nursing homes unless they have to be. But these people can't stay home. If they could stay home, they would be home. And so if they're in an assisted livings were built to allow customized living for high levels of care or low levels of care. And we're really just taking one tool out of the toolbox to remove choice for that elderly waiver medical assistance client. And that's my concern, is that the need hasn't changed. And this was a clever, positive way to incentivize providers to take a higher medical assistance population. And they still are not making money. We still have providers holding on by a thread. And if this safety net is eliminated, it's just going to move them to the nursing homes, because the care levels aren't going to change and their needs are not going to change. So I urge you to consider supporting this bill and voting yes. Thank you.
Further discussion. Representative New Brindley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And thank you, Representative Zalesnikar, for bringing that all together after a weird conversation of distraction. That's exactly why this amendment is constructed the way it is, because this is all tied together. This elderly waiver disproportionate share is very directly related to availability of nursing homes. This amendment is constructed this way because as we remove the disproportionate share, we are going to take seniors from a lower cost setting and force them into the highest cost setting. That is the effect of the changes to disproportionate share in the underlying bill. We're going to move people from assisted living, which is less expensive, to nursing homes, which is the most expensive. And we're going to do that while at the same time we are gutting the loan program to our nursing homes that are financially distressed. So this underlying bill is going to decrease access to nursing homes by bastardizing the loan program, while at the same time driving our senior citizens from assisted living into nursing homes. It simply doesn't work. One of my very closest friends is a mathematician. She's got a master's degree in math. She tells me all the time, and it's not magic, it's just math. This isn't complicated. This is literally just math. And so, while we have nursing home facilities that are in state receivership, and frankly, I suspect they would find it pretty offensive that Chair Knorr is saying it's because of their misappropriation, their mismanagement. Well, maybe it has also become because the value-based reimbursement is 21 months behind. And again, if I were paying the costs, if my bills were what they cost 2 years ago, boy, would I be thrilled. And I suspect our nursing home facilities would be thrilled, because that's what they're getting paid for. That's the reimbursement they're getting. They are not getting reimbursed for today's costs right now. They're not. They are not getting reimbursed for what they are paying. That's the bottom line. And so to suggest that it is the fault of these nursing homes, that because we don't pay them what their bills actually are, that somehow they are mismanaging their facilities, is offensive, and it is dead wrong. It is dead wrong. So while these facilities are in receivership, while we actively have nursing homes that are distressed to the point of insolvency, we absolutely should pause and put the brakes on these new provisions that are only going to accentuate that problem. They're only going to make the problem worse. Madam Speaker, I'd like to just make sure that I have a roll call on this amendment already.
Yes, a roll call has been requested.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So folks, if you vote no on my amendment, you are acknowledging that while we have nursing homes that are currently today in receivership, that we are going to add to that problem. That's what happens. If you vote no on this amendment, you are choosing to add to that problem, to make it more difficult for our senior citizens to receive the care that they need. That's what you're doing with the no vote. If you vote yes on this amendment, you are acknowledging that we have nursing home facilities that are distressed to the point that they are in receivership. And we have to put the brakes on programs that are going to make that worse. Vote yes.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll. The chief clerk will call the names of the members voting remotely.
Carroll.
Carroll, no.
Carroll, no. Cagle.
Cagle, no.
Cagle, no.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 60 ayes and 68 noes, the motion, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There's another amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
So Lesnikar moves to amend Senate File Number 5335, the unofficial engrossment, as amended, and the amendment is coded A16.
To the author of the amendment, Representative Lesnikar.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And members, again, I'm talking about seniors in Minnesota. This is a bill that would be talking about the $12.35 per day rate add-on we did last session in 2023 to deal with the crisis on the nursing homes. So when I spoke earlier, I was talking about assisted livings. They are completely different reimbursed systems. This bill is talking about the nursing homes. And as I stated earlier today, that nursing homes are going to be under federal mandates, and so we are going down a path of mandates without money. Mandates with no magic money tree. Mandates that are going to make us feel better in this body that we did something, and the reality is we did nothing. We absolutely did nothing to change the issue that we have at hand, and that is we have a tremendous amount of seniors in this state, especially in northern Minnesota, that are aging, that are going to be over 85. They are going to surpass 100. They're going to be the centurions that are not going to have care. And so what this does is extend this one-time funding that we did last time. And what I think it really is saying to Minnesotans is, like, we realize that we had mandates that we passed in this body and a federal body during COVID, when we also fined you, we fined you $1 million. So imagine what would have happened to the financial performance of the nursing homes if we wouldn't have fined them $1 million for nothing that was of any fault of their own during COVID. I mean, how crazy is it to think that we expected the same level of survey perfection during COVID, a historic pandemic, and we expected the Minnesota nursing homes to perform exactly if it was 2017, 2015, 2019. Does that make any sense to anybody in this room? Does that make any sense? We did not do that to any other profession that we are making laws for in this body. We had some humility. We had some level of understanding of what. I'm wondering if anybody here has ran 24-hour operations or even worked in them shift after shift after shift, or during the pandemic if they did it. Because if you did it during the pandemic, you would know why we have a healthcare problem, why nurses don't want to be nurses, doctors don't want to be doctors, and aides are saying the same thing. We put them under tremendous stress. And we had a pandemic, and we didn't know what was happening, but it affected the people that do 24-hour care. And then we socked it to them in a 1-2 punch. When they were down, like the whole world was, we said it's a great idea to fine you $1 million and have you financially be in ruins. And then we're supposed to be surprised that anybody needs to have a nursing home assurance loan, or we need to have some rate modifications. It's absolutely ludicrous to me that we're even in this discussion. And it tells me where the disconnect is of really understanding how complicated 24-hour operations are. There is, every day is Sunday, every day is Saturday. There are no remote workers in healthcare. It's great that everybody wants a 3 or 4 day work week, weekends off, holidays off. It's great. But the hospitals, the nursing homes, the assisted livings, the group homes, any disability place, behavioral health units, they don't run this way, people. And if we don't address this temporary rate add-on, I would likely say would not be necessary in the nursing homes if they didn't have $1 million that they were fined by this body's through the Minnesota Department of Health during COVID. But we chose to fine them, so we took in revenue. This state agency took in $1 million. I tried to get it passed before to reimburse them for this during the COVID. That didn't pass. But now we're surprised we need to do funding. It shouldn't come as a surprise that the recovery is taking longer, The recovery is taking longer for kids to read. The recovery is taking longer for us to get police officers and public safety. The recovery is taking long in healthcare. It is the reality. There is no money tree to fund these mandates, and we can mandate till the cows come home, but it's not going to change the care people are going to get and the financial distress that the nursing homes are under. And this is the add-on that allows for that. And I believe, members, it's going to serve Minnesotans well. We did have a $17.5 billion surplus last year, and we spent it in 5 months. And it's unfortunate that there was no consideration to the fact that, you know, our federal government's going to put more mandates on us in 2024. Here we are, where we spent $17.5 billion, and our frailest people that built this state are going to have the least amount of options in their golden years. That's the reality for Minnesotans. We can and we should do better. Vote yes.
Discussion. The member from Hennepin, Representative Knorr.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. You know, 1 minus 1 equals to 0. We have to make sure that the math is working. Going after the same well over and over again doesn't make that we will increase funding in that same bucket. And quite frankly, the temporary increase for $12.35, we knew from the beginning that was a temporary rate increase to support the nursing homes that were dealing with some crisis at that point. We did it. We made sure that there was a limit in when it's going to be ending. That was part of the negotiations that we had. Members, in this amendment, it's also taking away money that we are adding to the loan program. And it's also, from the other side, I'm hearing that the assisted living don't deserve to have a little bit portion of that money that we know nursing homes have already applied for the entire amount. The math doesn't add up. Saying no to assisted living, that I've been hearing that they don't deserve at least some help when they need help, doesn't help the seniors, the long-term care programs that who really needed that additional support. So members, I will ask you to vote no on this amendment. The math doesn't add up. We don't have a fiscal note of what the cost is. We've never requested that. So we can't just make money appear from the thin air. We've got a process, and this amendment is one of them. Please vote no.
The member from Pope, Representative Anderson.
Thanks, Madam Speaker, members. Well, this one has certainly gotten the nursing home's attention. I think it was Friday when the emails started coming in about trying to save this nursing home rate add-on of, $12.35. And I sit here listening to the talk about this whole topic of funding for nursing homes and the money they got last year. A lot of that, I don't know if all of it or most of it, but a lot of it went into increasing the wages for those that work in our nursing homes. The goal of getting CNAs up to $18, $20 an hour, LPNs and RNs even higher yet. And on the way in this morning, I happened to hear an ad for McDonald's, and their starting wage was $18 an hour and $2 higher if you're on the closing crew. So this is what we're competing with to get people to work in our nursing homes. And the work is not easy. The people that do that, I think, are saints. And if a lot of this money went to increase the wages up to close to a living wage, we're going backwards here. How do you tell your CNAs and folks that work there, we're going to have to maybe back off a little bit. We're going to be cut, the money coming in from the state. It's really, really difficult to go backwards, and especially tell people that aren't making a living wage today that we're going to maybe have to at least freeze your wages, maybe cut something, cut expenses somewhere. So members, really appreciate the amendment from Representative Zalesnikar and would encourage a green vote. The money is there someplace. This is a big state. We spend a lot of money. We got to find it. These folks need to keep their jobs and a living wage, and to please support the amendment. Thanks, Madam Speaker.
The member from Chisago, Representative New Brindley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Representative Zelezna Carr, for the amendment. As Representative Anderson indicated, you know, we've been getting tons of emails, and I have a whole stack of signatures from people across the state who work in our nursing home facilities, who work as RNs, they work in social services, they work as a CNA, a TMA, an accountant, activities, an LPN, medical records, maintenance. They work a dietary aide. That's how I started in nursing homes, as a dietary aide. They work across the spectrum in our nursing homes, providing all of the different and varied services that our seniors need while they're living in these facilities. These signatures are from people who are providing direct care as RNs, as TMAs, as CNAs. It includes people who are doing the maintenance on facilities or doing the laundry, providing meals. The signatures from across this state asking us to save this rate add-on are the folks who are in the trenches. They're the ones doing the work. They're the ones who have been the beneficiaries of this rate add-on. But what we just heard is that this is a deal we had to deal with the crisis, implying that somehow the crisis is over. I assure you the crisis is not over. If the crisis were over, we would not have 2 nursing homes in state receivership as we speak on this House floor today. But they are. They are in receivership because the crisis is not over. It's not. And we're going backwards. We are going backwards. Now again, let's put these together, right? While the rate bump goes away, this rate add-on, while that goes away, Democrats are also taking the loan program for these nursing homes that are in financial distress and expanding it to whoever wants it. And frankly, I'll tell you what, Chair Knorr, I suspect that these assisted living folks who you want so badly to have access to this loan program, I bet they'd take the disproportionate share any day of the week. I bet they would make that trade with you. I suspect they would be thrilled to maintain disproportionate share in lieu of being forced to take a loan because they can't meet their expenses. That's what we're doing. That is the effect from this. Our nursing home facilities are facing a cliff right now as we speak. They are facing a cliff when this rate add-on goes away. And frankly, how the Democrats ever thought a temporary rate add-on for nursing homes was a good idea is beyond me. But it's the best we could get. It's the best we could get. The best we could get was a temporary rate add-on and a loan program. And we took it to try to buy some time to actually solve some problems. And unfortunately, we haven't chosen to do that. Instead, with this human services bill, we are choosing to make the problem worse. We are allowing the rate add-on to disappear while at the same time we are opening up the loan program to whoever wants it, and we're getting rid of disproportionate share, which is going to drive more people into nursing homes. This is wild. But that's what you're doing with this bill. And I know I know so many eyes are glossed over because human services and talking about elderly waivers and how we fund these things is complicated. I get that. But this is not. This is really simple. We're going to allow a rate to be cut while at the same time we remove access to a loan program by opening it up to just whoever wants it, and by at the same time driving folks from assisted living into the most expensive setting to receive care, nursing homes. It just doesn't work. It doesn't work. This is going to collapse the system that we use to take care of our senior citizens. It's not just bad policy, it's immoral. It is immoral that we are taking away these resources and making it harder and harder and harder for our nursing homes to do the job that they were created to do. And that's take care of our loved ones. This Zeleznikar amendment will extend that rate add-on and maybe mitigate some of the damage that the Democrats are doing through the rest of this bill. This is an easy yes vote to try to save our nursing homes.
The member from Douglas, Representative Franson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. To the amendment at hand, so I was sent a text message from one of our nursing home administrators in the district I represent asking me to support the A16 amendment. And out of curiosity, I just wanted to know how that rate add-on was being spent. And the administrator said that they are continuing to put into staff. Staffing is still difficult at the nursing home, and there's just not enough team members to operate at full capacity. So members, the add-on is going into existing wages, hiring incentives, because currently the nursing home is operating at a negative margin. So members, it is imperative that we once again come to the aid of our nursing homes and make sure that they have the tools necessary to succeed. Members, we're talking about our loved ones, our grandmas, our grandpas, our moms, our dads that may be in long-term care facility. And we want to make sure that the staff is there for that care. So members, I implore you to put away partisanship and look at the greater good, which is funding our long-term care facilities. So members, I ask you to support the A16. Thank you.
Further discussion. Representative Zeleznikar.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, members, for your discussion tonight. And I guess what I would like to say to all of you is that this $12.35 that has been added on in this temporary, well, to Rep. Knorr's point, was agreed upon to be a certain period of time. But as we've said through many conversations on human services and education, what we know as facts has changed, and we modify all the time based on the facts in this chamber. I heard it on the opioid issue, on why we would or would not do things. I hear we deviate and modify all the time. But yet when it comes to the most frail seniors, we are not willing to do that because we think they're making too much money. $200 a day, whatever number you want to say, that number comes down to very specific expenses. What you're paying for the aides, what you're paying for the cooks, the housekeeper, the dietary aides, food. How many of you have had your grocery bill go up in the last few years? It's not that the assisted livings and the nursing homes are immune from that cost. They have the same expenses for their electric bill. The for-profit pay property taxes, which means those are the ones contributing to our public safety, to education for schools, to the 911. They're paying property taxes to support those types of mutual shared benefits that we all have. So this $12.35 question becomes, for a facility, a per day, you can just take that rate times how many residents they have, and a 44-bed facility is going to be less than a 100-bed facility. It's straight math. But when you look at it, this is going to be a thousands of dollars loss. I think to the point members have said here is that nursing homes have not recovered. And knowing what we know with the number of closures and the aging population we have in Minnesota, are we prepared for the issues that are going to come when we remove this $12.35 that was intended to be short term? But when you're looking at the hit the nursing homes took for 2.5 years working without adequate staff through a pandemic is called something for a reason. We've never had this before. And yet we're going to say, we're going to pull the rug out of you, 384 facilities, even though we said it was going to be short term, and we fully acknowledge as a body here that the problems haven't been solved, and you don't have the money to cash flow, and you don't have the money to pay people $20 an hour as an aid, and the funding source is this body, that we're just going to fine you because that's all we can do. We're going to regulate that you should have staffing ratios. We're going to regulate that we come and survey you, and then we're going to talk about it. But at the end of the day, it's not going to change Millie's experience when she's getting care. It's not going to help Brenda the aide. It's not going to help the people. It's not going to do anything. It's smoke and mirrors is all this is. And I'm telling you that if we do not fund the nursing homes until we can see that they're starting to turn the corner. Nursing homes, this is the group that has an 18-month delay. There is no inflation adjustment. And so we like to talk about how necessary inflation adjustments are in certain places like education, and I agree. But then why is it not important in the nursing homes? Why is it not important? We pay for food in the that's like saying, okay, schools, take your costs from 2019 and make it work. Make it work with the wages for your teachers, your paras, your cooks, everybody. And just be happy with that, and we'll give you 2% or whatever it is. We're not going to do inflation. That's what we are saying to the nursing homes. And ask yourself if that makes sense, because if it doesn't make sense in one place, explain to me how it makes sense in another place. When we aren't able to pay as a state the most frail caregivers a wage. We were okay with it with PCAs, get them to $20 an hour, so was I. But when it comes to the nursing homes, hard no. $200 a day right now, if you're gonna stay in a hotel, you're gonna see that bill come across at many places. Everything costs more today, everything. I wish it wasn't that way. But what you pay for everything is more. And when you wrap up those costs in the nursing home, it's a 100% cost report. And so if we don't fund them, we're going to see deterioration of it happen more. My point is six months further would give them a chance to get a little bit farther away from this pandemic. We're at a really crucial turning point. The long-term care imperative has suggested that it's about $10 million to do this for 6 more months. We've got $2 million in a slush fund. We've got a projected $3.5 million surplus again. So I'm just doing straight math. I've come up with $5.5 million for you. And I'm sure with this multi-billion-dollar budget, there is money if we want to find the money. We don't have a lot of options. We're going to be back at the table here in one crisis after another. But members, the issue is we're crawling out of a pandemic, and do we want the crawl to be a free fall? Because it's going to look like that if we don't do something to help the most vulnerable people. I urge members to vote green.
Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of the A16 say aye. Those opposed say no. The motion does not prevail. The A16 amendment is not adopted.